Boston go at the 3. 4-man front. Receiver in motion. Low snap. He runs and he throws. Caught. Touchdown. It's caught. Hardman caught the ball. The Chiefs have won. The Chiefs have won. The entire bench empties. Chasing Mahomes in the end zone. Their third Super Bowl in 5 years. The Chiefs are back-to-back Super Bowl champions. It is a dynasty. The Chiefs have won Super Bowl 58, 25-22 in overtime.
All right, I said last week I didn't care about the Mahomes versus the Brady conversation. I lied. I care. I do. I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. The only thing I could think of last night as I was watching that final drive was he's the best. He's the best to ever do it. You guys can take whoever you want to. You can put up your player against my guy. I'm going to take my guy. My hand in a game of poker, it's a royal flush. I win. You lose, I win. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Yeah, I'm going to gloat today, guys, because I get to do that. Because the Chiefs just won the Super Bowl for the third time in the last 4 years. They won back-to-back. They're the first team to do that in the last 20 seasons. It was an unbelievable game last night. First 2.5 quarters, super mid game. By the end of that one, though, that was an all-time classic. That's what we just witnessed last night. And what you saw at the end is what we all dream of, right? When we were trying to assess this game, we were all going back and forth, and you heard it nationally, locally, wherever, whoever it is that you like listening to. By the way, that audio courtesy of Westwood One, a fantastic call by Kevin Harlan. Whoever you listened to, it basically came down to this. So one team has Patrick Mahomes and the other team doesn't. And that's what matters. And in the end, T-Bone, that is what mattered last night. When you were watching the game, and I saw this early on, the 49ers were so much better for the first 25 minutes of that game. So much better. And they were up by 10. They should have been up by 17 or 20. They could have killed the Chiefs early on, put them so far behind that with this version of the Chiefs offense, they didn't have the ability to come back. But they just couldn't do it. They didn't have that kill shot early on in the game. The Christian McCaffrey fumble was something that held them back. And then you had the holding call and the false start by the best player on that offense potentially with Trent Williams, their left tackle. He gets caught. That essentially kills that drive. They just had too many self-inflicted wounds. And then you've got later on in the game, the punt return where they muff it, and that gives the Chiefs another opportunity to score. The Chiefs won that one. This is not a, 49ers blew it kind of a thing. We'll get into that more, but they didn't kill the Chiefs when they had the opportunity to do so. And when you got that dude on the other side who has 27 lives, not 9 lives, 27 lives, you can't allow that opening, and they gave him too big of an opening, and he ran right through it.
Yeah, you never saw that kill shot from the San Francisco 49ers, and this is why I've always talked about, and look, I'm going to talk about Mahomes in a second, but this is why I always talk about having a great defense and why it matters in the playoffs, because the Chiefs' defense prevented that kill shot. The Chiefs' defense gave Mahomes time to finally figure out the 49ers defense, because you knew that they weren't going to shut them down for 4 quarters. Yep. You knew at some point they were either going to wear down or Mahomes was going to find something that was going to work, and that's exactly what happened, and the Chiefs defense played really well last night and was able to keep them afloat until Mahomes got going. And then, like you said, I mean, it's just as simple as, man, if you don't have the kill shot and you don't play perfect football, you're not going to beat Patrick Mahomes. Forget just the Kansas City Chiefs, just Patrick Mahomes, because those 2 turnovers were the ones that were really costly for San Francisco, and Mahomes was just excellent once again, taking what was given to him. And I thought early on, man, San Francisco's getting a pass rush to him, and then even then, Mahomes kind of figured that out in the second half. So
I thought Mahomes played horribly for the first 2.5 quarters of that game. Yeah. I did not think he was playing well. It seemed like the pressure was getting to him. He wasn't trusting what he was seeing. He had Rashee Rice open a few different times where he was so locked on Travis Kelce in the first half. Yeah. Kelce wasn't getting open. Fred Warner was amazing, absolutely amazing in that game. And by the way, the play that they tried, I think it was at the end of regulation, where they went back shoulder to Kelce. There was 6 seconds left whenever they tried it. Fred Warner was in perfect coverage. They did everything they possibly could to be able to drape Kelce for the entirety of the game. He made a couple of plays late. Mahomes in the fourth quarter and then overtime. What more can you say? But he did not play well for the majority of that game. There was real question of, like, who's going to be the MVP of this game? Because Mahomes hasn't played well. Pacheco hasn't really had a great game. Kelsey for the first half did nothing. Literally one catch for 1 yard. The best players on the 49ers, all of their best players, had fewer yards than Travis Kelsey at the end of the game, not named Christian McCaffrey. So it was like, okay, Juwan Jennings is going to win this MVP, I guess, for throwing and catching a touchdown in this game. And that was all because Mahomes hadn't played particularly well. But when the game mattered the most, it was Mahomes, it was Kelsey, and it was Chris Jones that stepped up to be able to get the Chiefs that win.
I agree with you. In the first half, Mahomes looked much more tentative, certainly, than he had at any point in the playoffs. And let me get this straight. The Chiefs put the ball on the ground 4 times. 14 of the first 15 offensive plays. Take away the bomb to Hardman. They accumulated a net yardage total of 37 yards. And then the second half arrives. Overtime happens. And as much as we want to, and we should, justify and once again proclaim everything that was great about Mahomes, the ultimate difference maker, how about the counterpunch from the Kansas City staff as well? How much did we talk, guys, in the days and the weeks leading up to Super Bowl 58? Reed versus Shanahan. And guess what happened? Reed had the counterpunch. Spagnuolo did his thing defensively as well. And just some quick variations, not even anything really, really spellbinding. But think about it, BK. You unleashed Mahomes as far as giving him the ability. Some triple option sort of formations there, too. And then they ran the same old reliable plays multiple times to get the 49ers, had them moving in space, neutralize Bosa a little bit more coming off of the edge by having Mahomes actually step up and give that slightly different look. It's something you wouldn't do in the regular season. It's something you didn't see earlier in the playoffs, but they unleashed these components at exactly the right time.
Yeah, they did everything they needed to, and that's what this season has been all about, really. This postseason has been all about for the Chiefs.
Throw the regular season in
I
there.
can't believe this team won the bleeping Super Bowl, guys.
Either.
I hated this team. I am a Chiefs fan. I grew up there. You guys know the story. I hated them. Absolutely hated this Chiefs team. I texted my buddies in the middle of that Bengals game, which ended up, by the way, being the turning point of the season, saying, I hope this team misses the playoffs. I hope they don't even make it. This team doesn't deserve to make the playoffs and have the opportunity to play for a Super Bowl. And literally 6 weeks later, not kidding, 6 weeks time later, they are hoisting the Lombardi over their heads. And it all happened so fast. Like, they went from this team that you can't trust. They're going to shoot themselves into the foot. And by the way, the first half of this game was again. It was essentially a microcosm of the Chiefs season. The season was fumbles and dropped passes and weird plays and defense in the first half not totally living up to expectations. And then everything in the second half was like, okay, if they put it together, this is what it would look like. And it all happened on the biggest possible stage. And now what you have is a dynasty. Like, there is no question about it any longer. This is what Mike Greenberg had to say earlier today on Get Up when talking about whether or not we have officially reached that point.
There's no question about it now. With that win, with 3 championships in this era, plus another Super Bowl appearance and all the winning that they've done, the Kansas City Chiefs are not just the team of this time. This is a dynasty that ranks with the great ones in the history of the sport.
Nobody has the official, like, measurement of what a dynasty is, right? It's how you feel in the moment. Basically what it is. The true definition of a dynasty in the sports sense is just an elongated period of dominance over your respective sport. That's what it is. And so everybody's got a different idea, different definition of what that means. For some people, that means for an entire decade, you have to dominate your sport. And if you have it that way, like, there's very few true dynasties in the history of any professional sport because it's incredibly difficult to have that kind of stretch where you're dominant. But I thought Mike Sando over on The Athletic had a really good definition of it earlier today. And it's not just because it kind of applies with mine, but I think it gets to the dynasties of the NFL. He said that a dynasty for him is 3 Super Bowls in a 5-year stretch, the best regular season winning percentage over that 5-year stretch. So not just playoff success, but also doing well in the regular season, being the best regular season team over that span. And you got to reach the conference championship at least half the time during whatever your dynasty was, however long it lasted, which makes sense to me. That's the Final Four. That's where teams are really measured. The teams who fit into his criteria are the Steel Curtain of the 1970s, the 80s 49ers with Joe Montana, makes sense, and the 2000 Patriots. And then you can add the Chiefs to that list. I think that's right. If you were looking back at the history of the NFL and you're trying to like tell your friend about, hey, who are the teams that mattered the most? When you're trying to tell the story of the NFL, what teams can you do that through? I think those are the teams to tell those generations of fans what it was all about. And so for me, T-Bone, again, I can't speak for anybody in our audience. I think it's pretty definitive, though. They are officially, as of last night, a dynasty. The Kansas City Chiefs have met what the 70s Steelers did, the 80s 49ers, the 2000s Patriots. If you want to throw the 90s Cowboys in there as well, that's totally fine. The Chiefs are now included in that group of the best dynasties in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, I think we both said it going into the Super Bowl that if they won this one, they would officially be categorized into that category. And I think that's right. When you win 3 Super Bowls in that 5-year stretch, you have to be put into it. And you not only just the 3 Super Bowls, but you've been in the AFC Championship game for even the years that you didn't get there, including if you want to date back before the first Super Bowl, back to 2018 when they got there, when they lost to the Patriots in overtime. So, yeah, I think they're officially a dynasty. The one thing that I would, and I don't even know if it's much to argue against, but the only thing that I don't even think matters now when you're grading a dynasty, I don't think you even have to have the best win percentage in the regular season. I think if you just dominate in the postseason, as we've seen with the Chiefs, really the last 2 years, I didn't think the last 2 Chiefs teams were good enough to win a Super Bowl. And both ended up doing it because they had the best quarterback in the game in Patrick Mahomes, so there's no denying it. They are a dynasty, and they are going to be a team that, I hate to say this, and I can't remember if it was Mike Sando or somebody else that I read in The Athletic today. They're only going to get better. They're going to be adding to their wide receiver room to help out Patrick Mahomes here this offseason. Like, they can get better from here because back-to-back years, I don't think this has been the better team that Patrick Mahomes has had. I felt like these were kind of, last year was more of a rebound year. This year they at least had the defense to help kind of get them there. But, man, they have the making of what could be an incredible dynasty and an incredible run, not just from what we've seen in the last 5 years, but what is yet to come.
And especially from an offensive standpoint, BK, I know this whets your appetite to think about what this team may be able to do in the draft as far as maybe adding some personnel.
I don't want to get there yet because I want to talk about this team first. We'll get to what it means big picture-wise here in just a minute. But I want to get back to what you said there, T-Bone, that this team was able to do it. And that this team, which was clearly the worst regular season version of the Chiefs that we've seen thus far with Patrick Mahomes, was able to get the title. And what does that mean for the rest of this league? Because maybe, Bradford, you're right, they're going to get better. I'm not sure. We'll see, because they've got some big decisions on the defensive side of the ball this offseason with Chris Jones, Jarius Sneed. There's a lot of stuff going on. But they have now gone through 2 different versions of the 49ers. The rookie contracts for Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Jalen Hurts. And they have 3 rings while going through that version of the NFL. So not only has Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs team been able to create what is a dynasty by at least our version of that here in this room, they have also prevented guys like Josh Allen, Lamar, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, etc. And now you look at it like Kyle Shanahan and what his legacy could be if not for these 2 Super Bowl losses. They have prevented those players, coaches, individuals from reaching significant heights that otherwise I believe they would have. If there was no Patrick Mahomes, we might be talking about Josh Allen the way that we are currently talking about Patrick Mahomes, or maybe he fits into like the Peyton Manning side of things. We might be talking about Lamar Jackson as a 2-time MVP with at least 1 Super Bowl ring. We might be talking about Jalen Hurts after the way that he played in last year's Super Bowl of, hey, man, yeah, weird year this year, but hot damn, you remember how great he was, where he was a borderline MVP candidate all season long and then outplayed the other team in the Super Bowl, won that one? Like, there is so much that has been altered with the rest of the league by their dominance, and the only thing I can compare it to is the 90s Bulls. It's the only thing that is similar to what we're witnessing right now. I guess you could go to Brady as well, where early in the 2000s, Brady was able to hold some guys back, especially with like Peyton Manning, for example. But the closest comparison that I've got is the 90s Bulls, where for the 6-year stretch when Michael was there, it didn't matter who you had. You got Charles, cool. You got Patrick, cool. Those guys you can't get your rings. Dominique, those guys aren't getting your rings because we are going to be collecting all of the rings over the next 6 years. And that's where the Chiefs are right now. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys could check us out on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/101ESPN-STL. That is where you can go to get involved in the graveyard chat over there as well. There's plenty going on over there on YouTube. Again, YouTube.com/101ESPN-STL. We'll be talking plenty about the Blues throughout the day today. We'll get to some of your questions throughout the show today as well. What I want to get to next is the 49er side of things, because this wasn't just a game about the Chiefs. It was also about some of the failures of the 49er side, and I want to give some props to Brock Purdy. We'll get into that coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Take the fast lane home weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Gary Davis on 101 ESPN. Two former pros and one average Joe. The fast lane is driven by Scrap Mart Metals Recycling. They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
To Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers. They played a heck of a football game. They didn't lose this game. Patrick Mahomes won this game. And Kyle Shanahan will have his team back. He did all the right things, made all the trick calls, went for it on 4th and 3, put them in a position to finish the game. There was too much Patrick Mahomes. Kudos to the San Francisco 49ers for a very, very successful year.
Hey, look, Patrick Mahomes.
That was Bill Cowher on the postgame show over on CBS talking about the Chiefs not the 49ers not blowing that. The Chiefs just took it from them. They found a way to come up with the plays when it mattered the most. I actually agree with Cowher on this. I don't think this was a game where, I know we got to do the, did the Chiefs win or did the 49ers blow it? Sometimes it can just be like, hey, man, they played a football game. It was 50-50. They literally went to overtime and needed almost the entirety of the first period of overtime to be able to determine a winner. If you played that game 100 times, I think the 49ers won it 40 of those times. They were awesome yesterday, man. They had a few too many big-time mistakes, and they didn't have Patrick Mahomes. And that was essentially the difference in the game. And so as I look back at that one, yeah, we'll talk about some of the nitty-gritty. We'll get into it. But, man, I want to give some flowers to Brock Purdy. I was critical of this guy. And I still, I'm doing this because of what my priors were. I think he's the 12th to 17th best quarterback in the NFL. And I think yesterday, if you evaluated him through that lens, man, he was good. He was really good for the vast majority of that game. I saw somebody on our text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, said a little earlier today, Chris Jones did not have a very good game. He didn't have the impact that you would have liked to have seen out of a guy that's going to ask for $30 million. Totally disagree. Chris Jones was a game wrecker in that one, dude. You know why he didn't have the stats that you would otherwise expect? Because Brock Purdy was unbelievable at avoiding pressure in that game. Were there a couple of throws that he'd probably want back? Sure, absolutely. But that's for every quarterback. There were a couple throws in that game that Patrick Mahomes would like to have back as well.
Look at his interception.
It was terrible. Absolutely awful. But when he was trying to avoid pressure, man, he was as good at that. Now, not as elusive in terms of getting 30 yards gains out of it, but he was as good at avoiding pressure against the Chiefs as Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson were in those two games against Kansas City. So I want to give the kudos today to Brock Purdy. I want to give a lot of credit to Christian McCaffrey. I know there are people coming on the air today, and you'll probably hear this nationally. They should have given Christian McCaffrey more touches. Really? Should they? He had 22 carries in the game. He had 8 catches in the game. It was his most touches in an NFL game since the 2019 season. So he was plenty involved. They couldn't get the other guys going. Brandon Ayuk finished the game with 3 catches for 49 yards on 6 targets. Deebo Samuel, 3 catches for 33 yards on 11 targets. Mm-hmm. George Kittle, your boy.
Perfect, by the way, that Bradford's here today.
I was prepared.
2 catches in the Super Bowl?
He was ghost.
For 4 yards?
I admit it.
He, by the way, was lined up in the backfield on the 1 sack of the game.
Oh, come on, George.
He screwed up the pass pro. So I know that everybody's telling me about how great of a blocker George Kittle is. And, man, imagine if he was on the Chiefs and not Travis Kelce. How good would they be?
He still is.
Now, man, the best tight end in the league, the best tight end, in my opinion, the league history was on that field yesterday. He wasn't wearing a 49ers uniform. So I want to give the credit to Brock Purdy. I thought he played a really, really good game in that one. And Christian McCaffrey was terrifying. Every time he touched the ball, I was like, please don't touch it again. Please don't touch it again. Please don't touch it again. Because that dude was amazing.
We've had a bit of a similar debate earlier in the season regarding one Isaiah Pacheco. Here is where I have my contention. My contention lies with the way that McCaffrey actually was utilized. Now, hear me out. Between the time at which the 49ers took that 10-3 edge and then overtime, because until that point, first, early second quarter, 8 carries, good balance in the offense. He had 6 of those carries, BK, in overtime. So in the ensuing stages, as Kansas City is rallying, as Kansas City is making the adjustments, that means that on only 8 occasions, when the 49ers needed to try to salt this one away, did McCaffrey actually have it put in his stomach? That matters to me, and that falls back on Shanahan.
And I'll tell you why you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. Okay. Because here are the downs and distances in which they could have done that, like the second downs, right? 2nd and 10, 2nd and 15, 3rd and 15, 2nd and 18, 3rd and 11, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10. Let's see here. 3rd and 5, 3rd and 5. They gave it to him there. At some point, when you're in these long downs and distances, these are obvious passing downs. No matter what team you are in the NFL, you're going to be much more pass heavy in those situations.
Sure, but during the season.
Hold on.
During the season.
Hold on. They didn't run enough plays in the second half. That was the problem. They had 3 plays for -1 yards, 3 plays for -1 yard, 3 plays for 0 yards. That's the time that you're talking about where they could have put the game away. They just didn't have opportunities. They got behind the sticks. They didn't run a lot of plays. And after that, they muffed the punt. Now it's 13-10, and now the game is really on. And that's when they started getting him back involved again. So I hear you. As a Chiefs fan, I wanted nothing more than for them to stop giving the ball to Christian McCaffrey. He was my biggest concern. But I don't think this was a situation where it was a game plan issue. You also need to go back and look at the boxes. Look at the count. There were 8 guys in the box the entire second half. And when that is what you're going up against, you don't want to run into that. That's the worst thing you can possibly do as a team. They got the looks that they needed. They just didn't execute, man. Like, they had good stuff called. The Chiefs' defense executed against them. And sometimes that's the way that the cookie crumbles. Like, they played a good game, and they just didn't end up being able to come out on top because the other team happened to have Patrick Mahomes. The offensive game plan was fine for the 49ers.
You were behind the sticks, though, because, yes, 8 men in the box notwithstanding, and there were many, many occasions. I don't disagree with you. But during the season, this is what San Francisco repeatedly dealt with. And on 2nd and 10 second and long situations, they still insisted on giving it to the bell cow back. There was none of that yesterday. You had to be more patient. You could have been able to still maintain that time of possession. You were behind the sticks because you were voluntarily putting it in the air on so many different first downs.
Because of the box looks, man. You like, if you just want to run into the 8-man box, go for it. The Chiefs would welcome that because they were bringing their safeties up. They were playing single high to start out the second half. They gave them a different look. The first half, Christian McCaffrey killed them, and so they went into halftime where they had 35 minutes to be able to make adjustments, and they said, no more. No more of that. There was a question asked to Justin Reed after the game about, hey, the blitzes that you guys were running in the second half. There are different kinds of blitzes that you can run as a defensive coordinator. There's blitzes that are supposed to get after the passer. There are also run blitzes that you can have in your system. What they were doing in the second half was run blitzes. They were trying to say, you're not going to beat us with Christian McCaffrey. If Brock Purdy beats us, so be it. But we want Purdy to throw, and so they would run blitz, and then they would just try like hell to make sure that they had Chris Jones on the matchup that they wanted. And Chris Jones in the second half came up with some huge, huge plays. So I think that some of the talk about the 49ers game plan is way overstated. This was not a situation in which they ended up losing this thing because of like the game plan that Kyle Shanahan went with. He had more than enough opportunities for Christian McCaffrey. Now, if you do want to talk about Shanahan and you want to criticize him, I do think there's a place that you can do that. And it's with their decision going into overtime. Kyle Juszczyk was asked after the game about the decision to take the ball to start out overtime. Here's what Kyle Juszczyk had to say after the game.
You know what? I didn't even realize that the playoff rules were different in overtime, so I assumed you just want the ball because you score a touchdown and win, but I guess that's not the case. I don't totally know the strategy there.
So,
that's Kyle Juszczyk. Gosh.
That's bad.
Yeah, that's a bad look.
And I know that I have seen some out there that say basically, like, guys, why is this such a big deal? The players are just going out there trying to execute. They're trying to score anyways. It's a big deal because different situations call for different things. If you're a player and you've got a 3rd and 4, right, and you're running to the sticks, sometimes if you're like, hey, it's not the worst thing in the world for us to get a field goal here, if that is the situation in which you're in, you're probably not going to be reaching the ball out to get every last yard because that fumble, it's not worth it. The risk is not worth the reward. In this scenario, you got to risk it all because if you're taking the ball first, you don't know what the Chiefs are going to do. You got Mahomes on the other side. He's been great. His last 6 drives, he scored on, I think, every single one of them in that game. So you had to know, we need to get 6 here, boys. So they got 3rd and 4. They don't end up getting it because of a great a blitz called by Steve Spagnuolo, and now you got to kick it on 4th and 4. That's where they're at. Kyle Shanahan on overtime said this after the game. None of us have a ton of experience with it, but we went through all the analytics. We talked to all those guys. We decided that we wanted the ball 3rd. They didn't get the ball a 3rd time. And I think this is where I had an issue with the way that they went about it, T-Bone. If you're going into that game in overtime and you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, you want to go 2nd. Because you want to find out what Mahomes is going to do. You don't want him reacting to your drive. You want to react to his drive. If I was going to argue against myself, it would be this. Your defense was just on the field at the end of the 4th quarter. They're probably pretty tired. And you don't want them to go right back out there into the game. And this is where the analytics just cannot get every situation correct. They don't know what just took place during the regulation. They're just talking about in general, what's the best formula for this? I think they missed the mark a bit in what they were doing in overtime. I also think the players were clearly unprepared for what was coming in overtime, and that all reflects on Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, so I want to start with that part first. I think that really reflects on Shanahan, and that's not a good look, because I thought for the most part he coached this game very well. I don't think that the 49ers lost because of bad coaching decisions. I think they lost because the Chiefs were just better. I actually didn't mind the approach to overtime.
Okay.
And it's twofold. One, the last part you said there of, okay, yeah, our defense was just out on the field. So that part I totally agree with of, okay, let's start with the football first. Maybe if we get arrested, the defense gets rested, we go on a long drive, which to their credit they did. They ran a 13-play drive that ate up 7.5 minutes. We're going to have a fresher defense to go for this one last stand against the Chiefs. But the second part of that is the reason I like taking the football, and this is where I think Shanahan messed up, and I'm typically not the guy that says go for it on fourth down, is – like you said, Kansas City had scored on 4 of their last 5 drives, and one of those was the fumble, and they scored on the first play after the muffed punt. So I know Mahomes has found something to at least move the ball down the field. Mm-hmm. So if I'm Shanahan, I am playing for that third drive.
So can I explain real quick why I disagree with that part of it?
Sure.
Because if you go for the extra point on your drive, the Chiefs are probably going for 2. Because if your first drive in overtime is a touchdown, the Chiefs are incentivized to then go for the 2-point conversion. Now, maybe you as a coach think that you've got a great 2-point play defensively, that you're going to be able to stop whatever it is that the Chiefs do. I think that's probably a little hard for me to believe, given how good the Chiefs are, as we saw at the goal line with those kinds of situations, drawing stuff up. But that would be my retort, is I think that you then incentivize the second team to actually go for 2 in those scenarios.
Because it becomes sudden death, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. But the reason I say I like the idea, and this is the part I disagreed with, was when he settled to kick the field goal, was if you are going to play for that third one, the reason I like that is because if you're going to play that way, you're playing for the third trip down the field, which essentially what Shanahan said there is you're basically saying, okay, we pretty much believe that they can score a touchdown against us. That means we have to score a touchdown on our first one.
Yeah.
And he decided to settle for a field goal. And that's where I thought he made the mistake, because now you do really, if you score a touchdown there, and I understand what you're saying about the 2-point conversion, and I won't lie, I didn't even put that in the back of my head, but you at least say the pressure's on the Chiefs. They have to go down and score a touchdown. And if they score a touchdown, okay, now we get the ball back. If they don't go for 2, for example, we get the ball back and we can go down the field, and it just takes a field goal to win. The problem if you give the Chiefs the ball first is, one, your defense hasn't been able to stop them. So they score a touchdown. You go down and score a touchdown. Maybe you kick the PAT.
You go for 2.
But then you give it right back to Mahomes. And if you say the 2-point play one, like, I'm willing to risk it all for one play there at that 2-yard line for both sides. I understand going for it if you're, whether it be San Fran or Kansas City, who got a second. Yeah. And I understand playing, you know what, one play we can make one stop here inside the red zone. So
yeah, see, I think that's just overstating it. I think if you're the team that has the opportunity to be able to match, you are at an advantage because you just have more information. Like if I tell you, T-Bone, you're going to be going on a date tonight, but you're going to know nothing about the person that you're going out there to date. That's totally blind date. You're going in blind, you have no idea what's on the other side. It's going to be, you got to make everything up on the fly. Or I tell you, hey, T-Bone, you're going to go on a date tonight. Here are the 5 different things that you need to know about this girl. It could be a little easier for you to start up conversation, right? It's obviously a wild comparison, but the reason why I bring that up is because that's essentially what you're doing in this spot. Is I want to know everything that I can to best prepare my team for the situation that's coming. And the best way to do that is by taking the ball second, because you can then respond. If the Chiefs get a field goal, I can match with a field goal of my own, or I could just play super aggressive to try to end this game right now. If the Chiefs get a touchdown, man, I know I have to get a touchdown, so I'm going for every fourth down. I've got every opportunity to really give myself the best chance. I'm approaching every first down like I have a fourth down to be able to get that first down as well. And whenever I do score, if I get to that spot, the Chiefs aren't getting that third possession because I'm going for 2. I'm going to make sure that this game does not get to an extra possession for that first team. So that's why I disagreed with Shanahan's decision there. But I think there were a lot of decisions in this game coaching-wise that were questionable. Like the Chiefs decided not to challenge a couple of plays at the end there that the Kelsey spot and then the spot right afterwards, they take that timeout. That was unnecessary. He should have just challenged in that spot instead. Before halftime, I thought Kyle Shanahan messed up by not taking his timeouts while the Chiefs had the ball. Didn't give himself the opportunity to be able to potentially go down to score. I did like that Kyle actually went for it on fourth down. Are you going to criticize him for that, or what are we doing there?
That was gutsy. I would have settled for the field goal, but hey, I love that he did it because I didn't expect that. That was almost him going not so much
It was Dan Campbell's decision. It was the same thing as Dan Campbell did, but it didn't work for Dan. It didn't work for Kyle.
But the difference is Shanahan typically doesn't do that. Campbell always, Campbell going for it on fourth down is not surprising at all. Shanahan doing, when I saw the offense out there, I went, whoa, Shanahan's feeling it today.
I was so proud of him, dude. Kyle Shanahan is right now where Andy Reid was with the Eagles.
Yeah.
He needs his Mahomes. He doesn't have the all-time great quarterback. Andy went to, 5 straight NFC championship games when he was with Philadelphia. He was always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Lost in that Super Bowl against the New England Patriots as well. Kyle's going to get his. I'm really confident of it. He's a great head coach. He's got some stuff with clock management, but man, 90% of the coaches in the NFL get some of that stuff wrong, and we criticize them all year long. If you give me Kyle Shanahan, I feel like over the next 10 years, I'm going to get one. Yeah. I'm very confident that guy will end up getting his. It just, man.
Yeah, think about who he's lost to in the Super Bowl, too, by the way.
2 overtime games in the history of the NFL for the Super Bowl. Both of them lost by Kyle Shanahan.
And the 2 quarterbacks?
He had a double-digit lead in both of them.
All three that he's lost, he's had a double-digit lead.
And now that Brock...
Right, but in the 2 Super Bowls that went to overtime.
Now that Brock has been able to shed that game manager label.
You know what? The only thing Kyle Shanahan needs is just Mahomes not to be in the Super Bowl because he's lost to Mahomes twice and Brady once. That's just tough.
It's brutal, man. It's absolutely brutal. All right, that's Tanner Hendrickson. He is Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll get to some of your questions in about 10 minutes. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. If you guys have any questions, Super Bowl, Blues, otherwise, we'll get to those coming up here in just a little bit. The YouTube chat is off and running as well at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Coming up next, we do got to talk a little bit about the Blues today. Hot damn, man. What a weekend for them. I was worried about them going into the break after that loss that they had against Columbus. Not a great way to go into a break. They couldn't have responded any better. Why? Because they're finally getting the secondary scoring they were lacking. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Coverage of 101 ESPN is presented by Under Law Injury Lawyers. GetJim.com. Blues hockey is on 101 ESPN, and BK and Ferrario have you covered. Tune in every Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for the latest Blues news as BK and Ferrario broadcast live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light for the fans on game day, and by E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
The IRS definitely ramped up operations since the pandemic slowed them down, and activity only increases from here. Hi, this is Lance Story with the Lance Story Law Firm. If you're currently under audit or you haven't paid your taxes in the past, now's the time to call the Lance Story Law Firm. The IRS has a published Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which says you have the right to retain legal representation. Because IRS problems are legal problems, and the Lance Story Law Firm focuses specifically on addressing IRS issues for our clients. It's all we do. We get out in front of the IRS, devise the best resolution plan, and work to make sure you're able to take advantage of every program you're qualified to receive. So before you send money to some out-of-town, high-pressure company, call the Lance Story Law Firm. We're local, located right here in St. Louis, or visit Lance, DRURYlaw.com to schedule your free consultation with your local tax resolution law firm, the Lance Story Law Firm, 314-260-6120.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.
My house has a new glow. I love my windows. Universal Windows Direct.
Hey everyone, it's Brooke here. Right now, schedule your free in-home estimate, and for every 2 windows you buy, you get the next 2 for free, plus a free upgrade to triple pane glass, and they'll double your energy tax credit. Restrictions apply. Like me, you'll be saying, I love my windows.
I love my windows. They've got that brand new home effect. Universal
sponsored by Bug Out.
Blue Chip Pest Services is now Bug Out, the same local experts you know and trust with a new name. Our expert technicians are equipped with innovative products, personalized service, and put our customers first. Choose year-round pest protection with Bug Out. Visit bugOutservice.com.
The NBA plays on ESPN Friday night. It's the Rising Stars game. Coverage starts at 8. Your home for the NBA is 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Mahomes Magic ensures another KC masterpiece. Good morning, I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. One of the longest games in NFL history ended in an all-too familiar way. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs fended off San Francisco 25-22 overtime style to claim Super Bowl 58 for Kansas City. It's title number 3 over the past 5 years. Mahomes was named MVP for the third time as well, racking up 399 total yards. Yesterday afternoon at the rink, the Blues hammered the Canadiens 7-2. That victory followed a 3-1 win versus Buffalo. All told, St. Louis owns 58 points, good for 4th in the Central, entering tomorrow's battle against Toronto. Puck drop happens at 6 p.m. right here on 101 ESPN. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at Londoff.com and LondoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario. Live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Robert Thomas. Back door he goes to Neighbors. They score! The pass was intended for the back door. It deflected to Neighbors on the near side. He pokes it in. Nice play from Neighbors to Shen. Shot. Rebound Neighbors. He scores! Jake his 2 and the Blues lead 3-1. Allen the save. Neighbors, he scores! Jake Neighbors on the doorstep. Finds the back of the net again. Another power play goal. See, Jake, just drop your gloves and punch him in the face. There you go. Here we go. Jake does it. Jake Neighbors grabs a hold as Colvis 7. Neighbors comes back with a right of his own, and they go to the ice. Man of the St. Louis Blues have a player in his young Jake Neighbors.
Jake Neighbors is on pace for 30 goals. Let's take a moment to just think about that for a second. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Jake Neighbors was a huge piece of the Blues winning back-to-back games over the weekend. They go to Buffalo, win 3-1. They go to Montreal, win 7-2. They're off tonight, back at it tomorrow in Toronto. That's going to be a fun one against the Maple Leafs. We'll certainly be breaking that one down as Alex gets back tomorrow. By the way, Alex out today. He's just not feeling well. He'll be back in tomorrow. I think he drank a couple too many man sodas yesterday while he was watching the games at a sports book. So hopefully we get to talk with Alex tomorrow. We'll see if he's feeling a little bit better. But over the weekend, I couldn't help but be enthralled by Jake Neighbors, man. I was so wrong about this guy. I thought, hey, if you've got a third-line winger, you're feeling pretty good about this. Hopefully he can get you to 15 goals, maybe 35, maybe 40 points on a really good season. If he can be a bit of a net front presence on the power play, you feel pretty good about that. And instead, at the age of 21 years old, he's played 51 games and he has 18 goals on the season. I didn't think this was in play. And it's not just me. Jake Neighbors admitted over the weekend, hey, I don't think that I could be a 20-goal scorer in the NHL. Never had that in the back of my mind of what I could be once I got here. But, dude, he looks confident. He plays his ass off every single night. He is the prototypical St. Louis Blue. Everything you want out of a player, Jake Neighbors is providing that for you. He's got the leadership. He's super smart. He's gifted. He's just in the right places at the right times. I could not be more impressed by what the Blues are getting out of Jake Neighbors this season. And T-Bone, this is the kind of thing that you need when you're going through a retool, is a young guy that surprises you and exceeds expectations immediately. If you can get that out of a couple of more players, this retool is going to be expedited in a serious way.
Yeah, it really is. And you're right. I mean, I didn't expect this from Jake Neighbors as well, because, I mean, you just look at his production when he was in the WHL, where a lot of the prospects play out before they get drafted, and it wasn't gaudy numbers. You know, it wasn't like Bedard put up 120 points. So, like, I just expected him to be a solid third-line winger for the St. Louis Blues, and like you said, 10, 15 goals. I didn't think he'd be able to get on pace for 30. And he plays the style, and I know Craig Berube's not here anymore, but he's been playing the style that Berube really wanted when he was here, and I think that what Drew Bannister wants as well, which is he's a heavy on the forecheck forward for the St. Louis Blues, goes and parks himself, is the perfect power forward that the Blues have been looking for ever since the Cup run, I would say. And he's that guy. And you mentioned him getting to all the right spots. Man, he just parks himself in front of the net and just finds pucks that come off that are loose in front and puts them in. So I think he is a pleasant surprise for the St. Louis Blues. And you're right, you do need a couple of those when you're in a retool. I bet if Farming was on Truth Serum, he'd say they didn't expect this from Jake Neighbors.
Alex tweeted this out over the weekend. He said Jake Neighbors scored his 12th goal of the year below the faceoff dot in the crease. Ooh. According to NHL Edge, the league average this season is 4 such goals. 4. He has tripled the league average in terms of where he is scoring his goals from. Everything that you have been asking for from this team for really since the Stanley Cup run, to your point, T-Bone. Go to the net. Get to the front of the net. Get to the front of the net. We need more of a net front presence. And nobody would do it.
Yeah.
Nobody. They've tried everybody to get to the front of the net. You know who does it? Jake Neighbors. You know who else does it? Oscar Sundqvist. The 2 guys that they needed to be those players for them in 2024 have taken on that role and run with it. And it's no surprise that the power play has taken off the way that it has with those 2 guys as significant components.
And I'm glad you brought that up because you know what I think you're starting to see as well a little bit. And I'm not saying that the player I'm about to bring up is going to start doing what Neighbors is doing. I think you're starting to see it rub off on teammates a little bit to where you're seeing some more guys get a little bit closer to the net. You know, Kyrou scored a power play goal. Where was he standing? Right near the net, by the way, because they're starting to learn, hey, look, what Craig Berube said, it is right. Jake Neighbors has scored 12 goals below the faceoff dot. And I'm not saying Jordan Kyrou is going to become a power forward because he's seeing the success of Jake Neighbors, but just those 1 or 2 extra times that he's going to the net, like on that power play where they were like a python. You know, they were kind of strangling around the net, getting closer and closer, tightening things up.
Yeah.
That's going to matter more. That's going to lead to more power play success, not just for a Jake Neighbors, but for the whole squad. So I think he's been such a blessing in disguise for the St. Louis Blues just because he's finally doing what we've been heard preached about since the Cup run, which is just go park yourself in front of the net.
And the 21-year-old here in so many different capacities is really setting the tone. We've established just how invaluable he has been there on the power play, camping out, the willingness, the desire to score the gritty, gutsy goals, and all of this at the tender age of 21. And what I love, guys, the response. Obviously, the Blues come back from that extended break, hair on fire, so to speak, after the All-Star break. But Jake Neighbors now being one of the most stabilizing figures on this team. And I worried, BK, when we had the Tinder Thursday segment a little while ago, I wondered insofar as, okay, first full season, Jake Neighbors, is he going to be able to come close to replicating the first half goal production? Now, the November, we understand it was tremendous. He potted 8 goals. I'm not saying in December and January, only 3. You know, that's a real letdown. But for him to come out in the first 2 contests after the All-Star break and really grab that baton offensively, it's not just about the numbers here, how many goals with which he will end up, but rather the approach and the tenacity that he brings every single night. Because even if he's not on the score sheet, he's giving you exactly what you need as far as desire goes.
He's to that point, he's one of the few players before the Blues started to kind of piece this thing together here lately that, you know, we talked, you know, the team's not playing, they're not showing up on a lot of nights. He was one of the few guys that I think you could circle and say, you know, he may not put up a point in this game, but I know exactly what you're going to get from Jake Neighbors.
The other thing that you said that I liked a lot, T-Bone, was you're comparing him to Kyrou and what you want from Kyrou. I'll take that a little bit of a step further. Jake Neighbors allows Jordan Kyrou to be the player that he wants to be. If you have guys that are driving to the net, it opens up space. This is like in the NBA. If you've got a guy that will drive and kick, your shooters suddenly become better because they are creating space by taking that defense down basically below the goal line almost. Like, Jake Neighbors is exactly the type of player that I want playing with shooters. I want him to be on the ice to clear out space for Jordan Kyrou, for Pavel Buchnevich. And so I will be very curious to see as we continue along here, is that something they start looking more and more at? We mentioned it a few weeks ago, the possibility of Neighbors being a top-line player. I don't know that he profiles as that long-term, but I don't know that you need to if you've got this kind of style with which you're playing. So I like Jake Neighbors a lot. He is, I mean, I was taken to Braden Shin when he first got to St. Louis because of this style of play, and now we're seeing it from a guy that the Blues have drafted and developed internally. You don't see that a whole lot, man. Not in today's day and age with the way that players are brought up. All right, coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys can always get involved as well on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. That's where the graveyard chat is over there. We're going to get to some of your questions from the graveyard, from the text line, coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Kickstart your mornings with the opening drive on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Brooke Grimsley, Dan McLaughlin, and Randy Carricker. The opening drive, weekday mornings from 7 to 10 on 101 ESPN.
The opening drive is presented by Sumner One.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys can get involved as well via the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. A little bit of news to pass along from Jeff Jones, who covers the Cardinals down in Jupiter.
Don't tell me there's a big injury already.
The talk of camp today was the Barbie pink Ford Bronco that showed up in the lot it belongs to, and he guesses which
Barbie.
Cardinals player is driving the Barbie pink Ford Bronco.
I have an idea.
I'm going Newbar. That's my guess.
Mason Blaze Wynn?
like that, but no. Lance Lynn, money. Of course. Lance Lynn is
that was not going to be
the proud owner of the Barbie pink Ford Bronco.
That probably would not have been in my top 10 of guesses. It was Lance Lynn.
He's just Lance.
Well, he is bringing good vibes. Great signing by Mo.
Yeah, credit to Jeff Jones for the scoop.
314-399. There's an injury.
9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. All right, from the 314, guys, do you think that the Blues could finish in the top 3 of the division when this season comes to an end?
No. I think they're a wild card team. Though they are playing really well, and I know people hate it when I say this, the advanced numbers continue to say that this is not a sustainable thing for the St. Louis Blues. So, do I think they're going to be a playoff team? I'm starting to buy into that, but can they be top 3 in the division? I don't see that at all.
Boy, that's exceedingly tough because you have made all of this progress, guys, of late, and yet you're still 9 points behind Winnipeg. And the one thing about the Jets, it's an extremely good, adept, trustworthy team away from home as well. That matters in the second half of the schedule. If you're 14-7 away from your own home building too, I mean, regardless of how well the Blues can perform down the stretch, I think it's too big of a hill to climb yet.
The Blues have 7 more losses on the season than the Jets. 7. We are 50 games into the year, and they have 7 more losses than the team that's in third. So, guys, I hope for nothing more than this team proving me wrong once again. I thought they were dead in the water when they fired Berube, so I didn't see this coming, so I can obviously be wrong. I thought the Chiefs were dead in the water when all they added at the deadline was Mecole Hardman, and then Mecole Hardman makes the biggest play of their season with the touchdown in the Super Bowl. So I'm certainly more than capable of being wrong on stuff like this. But if I had to bet on it, do I think the Blues have any chance, realistically speaking, of getting third in the division? No, I'd be legitimately shocked by that kind of a thing. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 618. Guys, everybody says that Chase Daniel is the greatest backup quarterback from Mizzou. Is it time to give Gabbert that crown? No. Chase Daniel is still the GOAT.
Yeah. Did Gabbert play this? I have no idea.
Chase Daniel, the thing that makes Chase Daniel so special, he never played. Like, he was a guy that was drafted to never play and then continued for the entirety of his career. There was never a point in time where people were like, you know what? That Nick Foles guy, that should be our starter. Who was the guy with the Seahawks that got all of that money? Was it Lloyd? I'll have to look it up. But there was a Seahawks guy like 10 years ago that had like a 3-game stretch. No, it was the Packers. Packers ended up having a guy that was their backup. He had a good 3-game stretch. Seahawks signed him when they drafted Russell Wilson. They go into the next training camp. Russell Wilson beats him out, and they like had $20 million that was dead because of it. Nobody ever thought that way about Chase Daniel. Gabbert was drafted to be a star. It just didn't work. So Daniel's that dude. I love it.
When was the last time, speaking of that, like someone signed, because that happens all the time. Like, remember the Bears signed, who was it, like Mike Glennon or someone like that, to be their starter when they drafted Trubisky? Has that ever worked? I see that happen all the time where somebody looks at a backup. Trubisky just happened again recently
Rich
with the
Gannon
Steelers.
was that guy. He was with the Chiefs, ended up going to the Raiders, and I think won an MVP with them. So that would have been one that you could go to, but that was 25 years ago. So I'm really going down into the recesses of my memory.
Yeah, it never works out that teams try that. So I don't know who. Sure, I'm going to stick with what you said with the backup from Mizzou. But when you brought that up, I was like, I see teams do that all the time, and I don't know if I've ever seen it work.
It was Matt Flynn.
Yeah,
that was the guy.
I knew it was something Flynn. I was thinking AJ for some reason.
In a 4-game stretch in 2013 with the Green Bay Packers, he threw for 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And the Seahawks were like, "That's their dude. That's our guy."
Let me tell you right now, this conversation changes quite a bit in 5 to 10 years when one Brady Cook has some time under his belt.
Oh, stop it! Book it. Stop it.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to play a game of in or out. You give us a scenario, we will tell you if we are in or out here on 101 ESPN. But coming up next, we're going to get back to the Super Bowl from last night. A big game for everybody involved. We got to talk about the weapons on both sides. Chiefs' weapons stepped up. George Kittle, anybody seen him? Is he on a milk carton somewhere? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Congratulations to Jim Belcher in Olivet, Missouri. He was just named our 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now at 101ESPN.com to be the next fan of the week. Taking home Blues tickets and a $50 Buffalo Wild Wings gift card. 101 ESPN's Blues Fan of the Week is brought to you by Buffalo Wild Wings, official member of This Bar Bleeds Blue, presented by Bud Light. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
As you were watching the end of that game, as someone who had the Chiefs, I felt so good, so good inside that I had Patrick Mahomes and I didn't have Brock Purdy. And I think if you were a Niners fan, as much as you've defended Brock Purdy, as much as you've seen the numbers, as much as you believed or tried to believe in your heart that he is that dude, there's only a few people like that on the planet. And if you don't have one, I think you have to be sitting here right now saying basically everything has to be perfect for us to win with that guy on the opposite side of the field.
That was Bill Barnwell on ESPN talking about what it takes to be able to dethrone Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kylo. We'll get to in or out here in just a little bit. T-Bone, I think he's exactly right. At this point, with the way that Patrick Mahomes is playing, and I'm saying this, take off my Chiefs hat for a second. I'm saying this as a neutral observer. It's hard to say, okay, this is the formula to beat him right now, because the only dudes that have done it are Joe Burrow and Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have one of those two guys, and by the way, Tom Brady's going to be on games on the call next year, not in a uniform. So if you don't have Joe Burrow, it's really hard to convince yourself that in the playoffs, you've got the dude to be able to do it. What did this season mean for the rest of the league in the way that they're building? Because T-Bone, I thought the 49ers had most of what you're looking for. Now, I didn't know about the quarterback. That was the biggest variable going into this game. It did end up mattering to a degree last night. But when you look around the league and you're trying to assess your own team if you're not the Chiefs, what do you do to be able to construct a roster that can beat them in the playoffs?
So I'm going to bring this up, and I think there are different variations of how you can do this. But I think San Francisco was the team that was perfectly built to beat the Chiefs, and I think you almost saw that last night because, I mean, they did push this thing to overtime. You look at the quarterback position. Let's start with that. I don't even think you necessarily have to have a franchise guy, honestly, or a top. Let me rephrase that. You need a franchise guy, but I don't think you need to have a top 5 quarterback to beat Patrick Mahomes because Brock Purdy's not that. He's in that 12 to 17 range. I totally agree with that assessment. But what did Brock Purdy do? He played really well, and honestly, for about 3 quarters, outplayed Patrick Mahomes in that game. He was able to hold serve, and he didn't make that costly turnover. That's the one thing that you've seen with Josh Allen in the past, and going up against Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. There's always that one turnover that you can look back on and go, that's the one that you're going to regret later on. So you got to have the quarterback, in my mind, that can at least hold serve with Mahomes. And I thought Purdy did that excellent last night. You just got to have some weapons around you as well. I'm not saying you have to have the cast that the 49ers have, where you've got all those weapons, even though they didn't really show up much last night. McCaffrey was pretty good, but you got to have some weapons offensively. And I think the number one thing you have to have defensively is you have to be able to get pressure on Mahomes. And San Francisco did that last night. Now, they may not have gotten as many sacks that people would say that you need to get against Patrick Mahomes, but you could tell early on in that game, and BK, you mentioned this in the open, that he was uncomfortable. He was kind of locked in on Travis Kelce. You could tell the internal clock was really running on him, and it was because they were winning on the edge with Bosa. And honestly, I thought Chase Young played fairly well there for a while in that game also. And I think then the fourth element is you got to have someone that can at least slow down Travis Kelce. And I think Fred Warner did that for the most part last night. Kelce did end up breaking out late in that game. But I would say if I'm a team looking at how do you stop Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, you just got to play perfect football. And for the most part, San Francisco did that last night. There was the McCaffrey fumble. You had the muff punt, which was just a bad bounce off a guy that was right near the receiver. But you got to play perfect football. That's the one thing that you have to do. But you have to have all those elements that I just brought up. You got to have the quarterback that's going to hold serve with Mahomes. You got to have some weapons. Got to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes, and you've got to have somebody that can at least keep Kelce in check for a big majority of the game. And I thought Warner did that. I think San Francisco. I know they didn't win that game, and people may not end up saying they're the team to build around. I think they have the formula for the Chiefs. It just didn't end up going their way last night.
I totally agree with you. The structure, the makeup, it was sound. And BK, for the better part of 2+, even into 3 quarters, really, San Francisco, while not necessarily getting home on every play, it flustered Mahomes. You had the pressure from the edge, basically forcing him to be in that box of sorts. But you have the all-time great improviser who then in the fourth quarter and heading into overtime in concert with Andy Reid being able to take the shackles off to some degree and just make things happen, the singular force with his legs. How can you account for that? How can you defend that? San Francisco, Tanner, as you said, had everything down to a T. You just couldn't execute for almost 75 minutes. That was the difference.
I think the biggest part of this is what you said with the turnovers. We've had a number of people that have brought up the fact that, guys, if the 49ers don't muff a punt, they probably don't lose that game. 100%. Yeah. If the Ravens don't have a guy reaching for the end zone, it wasn't a bad play by Zay Flowers, a great play by L'Jarius Sneed. If they don't have a guy reaching for the end zone and fumbling the football at maybe the 3-inch yard line, going in for a touchdown, they might win that game against the Chiefs. If the Bills have 1 or 2 more plays that go in their direction, they might have beaten the Chiefs. It's hard. The margins are razor thin in the NFL. And last night, a lot of what changed this game, the CMC fumble, I don't even look at that because it was almost negated by the Isaiah Pacheco fumble as well. So it didn't really alter the game in a meaningful way. What did, though, was special teams.
Yeah.
The fumble on the punt and then the missed extra point. When you have those 2 massive, critical mistakes by the 49ers, it's the point that is literally taken off of the board. That didn't lose them the game. There was still plenty of time to be able to kind of change things up. There's too much time to be able to isolate that as the one thing that lost it for them. But even the fumble on the punt, just for field position alone, that's a huge momentum-changing play in that game. I think what you need, and I think this applies to teams like the Bills, the Bengals, the Chargers, the teams that are really, the Ravens, that are really trying to compete with the Chiefs in the AFC, edge rushers.
Yeah.
Edge rushers, edge rushers, edge rushers. If you're in the first round and there's an edge rusher that you think can be good, you draft him. Just take him. Take him immediately. That's something it's a prerequisite, man. I don't think that the Ravens had a requisite amount of edge rush in that game. Really good defense this year, don't get me wrong. Interior pressure, as good as anybody in the league. They didn't have it off the edge.
True.
The Bills didn't have it coming off of the edge. They were a team that won with depth. They had 4 guys that could get after the passer pretty well. You got to have a Bosa. Yeah. You got to have a dude that is an absolute. You got to have a Max Crosby. You got to have a capital D dude coming after Patrick Mahomes from start to finish. If you don't have that, you're done. You aren't going to be able to make him as uncomfortable as he needs to be over the course of a game. Another thing that I think is underrated, athletic linebackers.
Yeah.
Last night, I think one of the under-the-radar moments of the game was Dre Greenlaw jumping on the sideline, not doing anything wrong, just a total freak accident. Sprinting onto the field and tearing his Achilles. Like, that dude would have made a difference in the second half. And he's just gone. They have to replace him with their worst players. Their worst position on their team is the 3rd, 4th, and 5th linebackers on their roster. And they had to have those guys playing almost every play down the stretch. It's a big problem for a 49ers team that relied so heavily on their linebacker play over the course of the season. So fast, athletic, coverage linebackers that can erase things sideline to sideline. You got to have it. And that is something that a lot of teams have not been valuing in recent seasons in the NFL. Other things that are just quickly you have to be able to beat this Chiefs team. Creative defensive coordinator. If you don't have it, you're done. No chance, because you got to be able to confuse Mahomes. I thought Steve Wilkes actually had a pretty good night last night. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of stuff that they had not shown, tendency breakers. He's playing more man coverage than we've seen from the 49ers most of the season. So creative DC that gives you an edge there. Quarterback designed runs. Got to be able to make Spags wrong, because Spags has everything that you could possibly throw at a quarterback. When everything else goes wrong, you got to be able to do what Lamar, what Josh Allen, what Joe Burrow, honestly, has been able to do. I thought Brock Purdy did this pretty well yesterday. Even if it's just extending plays, you got to be able to make the defense wrong, even when they were right in the first 2.5 seconds. And then finally, play smart football. It's so simple, but it is so freaking hard to execute, dude. The old Bill Belichick cliche was more teams lose games than win games. And what he means by that, it's a pretty silly quote, but a lot of teams, they just play 60 minutes of football and they have 4 back-breaking mistakes that if the other team just doesn't make the mistake, they're going to win. So you lost that football game more than the other team took it from you, right? And I think that's what we saw a lot in this postseason. What changed for the Chiefs? They just didn't kill themselves anymore.
Yeah.
They didn't have that critical turnover, the 4 sacks in a 5-drive stretch, the penalty on the left tackle followed by a penalty on a wide receiver. Those are the things they did less of. You saw it in the first half, and it's why they got down so early. But those are the things that you just can't do against this Chiefs team. If you have those components, easier said than done, you can beat the Chiefs. But good luck finding an edge rusher, fast linebackers, creative DC, a quarterback that can run, and not having those turnovers or critical mistakes.
I think the edge rusher one's the most critical one of all of these that we've brought up, because we've seen it. I mean, last night when Bosa was in his face and Chase Young was getting there, and who's the other one I'm forgetting that was getting some pressure in that game?
Eric Armstead.
Yeah, Armstead, thank you.
From the interior.
You just saw Mahomes' internal clock's going. And look, Mahomes is going to figure it out. This isn't a matter of can you stop Mahomes, because the answer to that question is a big 2-letter word called no.
Eventually.
Eventually, he's going to figure it out. But can you slow him down enough to hopefully where your offense, to my point on the mobile quarterback, does your quarterback hold serve with Mahomes? You can hopefully open up a big enough lead to try and close the door on him. But every time that we've seen Mahomes go through a game where he has struggled, quote unquote, what's the common theme? Think back to the Super Bowl they lost to the Tampa Bay Bucks. What was the theme in that one? He was getting hit like crazy in that Super Bowl.
Harassment.
Yes, exactly. The same thing at the beginning of this football game.
Last year, he didn't play all that well for most of the game last season.
Bingo.
And it was because of the edge rushers that were coming at him from Philadelphia.
And that's the number one thing. If I'm a team,
the Bengals with what's his face, Hendrickson have made his life an absolute nightmare when they've gone up against him. The Raiders have given the Chiefs a lot of trouble over the last couple of years because Max Crosby is a nightmare to go up against.
And BK, also to your point in the second level, if Greenlaw is in that game, in all likelihood, you're not running with that mesh concept with Gray and Kelsey in the fourth quarter. You're not trying to execute that rub with James and Rice, for that matter, in overtime either.
Even if you do, it's harder to accomplish.
Completely changes the dimension.
Yeah, it changed the game. That the fumble on the punt, the missed extra point, the Greenlaw injury, and then the Debo, like, very brief injury going to the sideline, all of this stuff, it adds up. It adds up, and over the course of the game, you just ended up with it being too much for the 49ers to be able to overcome. All right, coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Let's play a game of in or out. You give us a scenario, we'll tell you if we are in or out. T-Bone's got one ready to go for us on the Blues, and what a potential Stanley Cup run would change for them. We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
It's time for another moment in Blues history.
On this day back in 2015, the Blues head coach Ken Hitchcock would move into sole possession of fourth place on the NHL win list thanks to his team's 6-3 win over the Tampa Bay Lightning. TJ Oshie, Dmitry Yashkin would score the first 2 goals of the game. Tampa would get one back, and then 3 unanswered goals by Steen, Backus, and Stastny capped off the Blues winner. Also picking up a goal was Vladimir Tarasenko, his 29th of the season, late in the third period.
This date in Blues history was powered by Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. For all your HVAC needs, classicaircare.com.
Bet like the pros with the world's largest sports book right at your fingertips. Circus Sports is now available in Illinois. Hi, I'm Derek Stevens. I've been a lifelong sports bettor, and I'm the owner of Circus Sports. We're excited that the Circus Sports app is now ready for action. Experience big app bets with high betting limits, tight money line splits, and more. Now you can download, fund, and bet like a pro from anywhere in Illinois. Download your new bookie today at circusports.com. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Come on, man. Are you in or are you out? It's in or out with BK and Ferrario.
Let's get into some NFL, not NFL quick hitters, in or out here on 101 ESPN. That's Tanner Hendrickson. He's Bradford Brones. I'm Brandon Kiley. I apologize. Let's get into this. T-Bone, start us out. You've got something for the people on the Blues.
Guys, in or out? If the St. Louis Blues go on a cup run, the retool is officially over.
Explain this a little bit.
The reason I bring this up is Doug Armstrong, the Blues have even talked about this, has a process that they want to go through, okay? And they've said about 3 to 5 years is kind of what this retool is going to take. We know there's a couple of stopgap guys on the roster. The reason I bring this up is if the Blues get to a Stanley Cup, or even a conference final, honestly, I think there will be a lot of pressure on Doug Armstrong to really bolster this team in the offseason and make bigger moves than I think he may want to make, to be a big spender in free agency, start adding in those depth wingers rather than waiting for a Jimmy Snuggerud to come up or a Dean to come up and some of their prospects, Dvorsky. I think there will be a lot of pressure on him from the fan base, maybe even ownership, to say, hey, we just went on a big time run. The retool's over. Forget that. Let's go make this team better. When he may be saying more of, no, this was kind of a fluke. This team got hot at the right time and made this run. We need to follow the process along, and we are still in a retool.
So, if they go on a run to the Cup, I'm rejecting the premise, but I'll go with it for you, T-Bone. If the Blues made it to the Stanley Cup final, are you saying they won it?
No, I just get there.
Get there and lose? I think it would officially mean you're out of a retool. But I think it would signify, like, if you end up being able to accomplish something like that in the postseason, it shows that you've got the players here that are better than what they showed with Craig Berube. And that it was actually Craig Berube that was the problem. Now, I don't know if I believe that or not, but clearly they had tuned him out. Whether that's a reflection of him, the players, doesn't much matter. This is where we're at. So, yeah, I'm in. I think that would absolutely be a sign that you're out of the retool. I don't know that it would accelerate the process for guys like Snuggerud or Dvorsky or anything like that, but I do think it would mean that they're more likely to go out and get some pieces to fill into the roster right now. I think it does make it more likely that Pavel Buchnevich, for example, would be re-signed this offseason, because then it would show you, with that guy as a top-line player for you, you can go to the Stanley Cup. So, yeah, I'd say that changes some things for you.
So they have to win the West. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
You have to win the West. I'm out, albeit begrudgingly. Here's an interesting quirk, though. Let's throw this wrench into it. If you do indeed muster a cup run in the West, you're able to topple Colorado, Edmonton, Vegas, Winnipeg, Dallas, somehow, some way. Would somebody like a Jimmy Snuggerud not have to maybe key some of those efforts later on in the season? What if the retool is modified because he needs to be one of the parts to get you to that hallowed territory?
The reason that I would say I'm out on this, I think it would be fascinating, and honestly, I hope it happens just so we can talk about it.
Sure, yeah. Get to a cup. That'd be great for us.
I'm with you, though. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm willing to be on Hopium because I didn't think the Chiefs would be Super Bowl champions today.
I don't know who the Blues version of Patrick Mahomes is, but
Jake Neighbors, what the hell's wrong with you? Have you seen him? He's great. I would say I'm out on it because I think they would kind of view it kind of how the Cardinals viewed that 2019 NLCS team, to where everybody kind of looked at that team and said that they didn't really belong, and then they kind of got whooped once they got there. That's how I think Army would approach it. Maybe he would become a little more aggressive in the offseason, but I still think they would define themselves as in a retool, or hell, they may even come up with a new word to define what they're in. So I'm not sure that it would really be over. They may say it publicly that it's over, but I think internally they would still believe they're in a retool.
I can't believe it's a hot take that I'm saying. If the Blues get to the Stanley Cup final, the retool is over. If that's my hot take for the day, I'm willing to go there for you guys. Bradford, what do you got?
It's never too early to look ahead to next NFL season, so that's exactly what we're going to do here. Despite having their hearts ripped out by the Chiefs last night, the 49ers, gentlemen, will actually enter next season, or at the moment, they're the betting favorites to reach the Super Bowl, to nay, win the Super Bowl. In or out, San Francisco should be the favorite today.
No, out. It should be the Chiefs. They have Patrick Mahomes, right? He's under contract for next year. And they should be the betting favorite going into every season from here on out. You should approach the seasons the way that you did with the Patriots, with Tom Brady. They're the favorite. And if they end up losing, it's a shocking reveal to everybody involved. That's where we're at right now. Like, I don't know how anybody could not be there. How could you watch last night, watch what we saw this postseason, see what this team was for the entirety of the regular season, and say to yourself, yeah, that's not the favorite? I can't believe that they were an underdog in that game, in the Ravens game. It's baffling to me. At least in the Ravens game, they were on the road. It's a neutral field against a team that's similar. even if I concede that they're somewhat better. And one of them had a quarterback that's one of the all-time greats, whether you think he's the best or 1B, whatever it is with Tom Brady. Yeah, no, this is absurd. I'm out. It should be the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm out as well. I think it should be the Chiefs because, as you said, they got Patrick Mahomes. The only time that I will kind of raise question of them will be the time when, if there is a time, we ever go into a season, we go, who is the number one guy for Patrick Mahomes to throw to? Because I still question their wide receiver room, and I think they'll upgrade it this offseason. He's still got Travis freaking Kelce on the team. He basically confirmed he's coming back last night. So until that moment occurs, I'm always going to be on BK's side of, they're going to have to be the favorite, so I'm out.
I'm out as well. Why anyone at this stage would want to open that Pollock / Patrick Mahomes door, I have no idea. I do find this interesting, though. After Kansas City, so you have San Francisco right now at number 1, Kansas City, and then 2 other AFC squads, Baltimore, Buffalo, and then coming in at number 5, Dan Campbell and the Lions. Just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how we really embraced the Lions' chances of maybe returning to the NFC Championship at least, but Baltimore and Buffalo getting the love ahead of Detroit.
Yeah, they're good. All these teams are really good, but they don't have Patrick Mahomes, so they are disqualified unless they have Joe Burrow, in which case he potentially could get to.
Oh, should they be number 2?
All right, from 6. The 314, guys, in or out, the Super Bowl should be played on a Saturday. I think they should move the Super Bowl to the day before President's Day. Just have that Monday off, and we can make it work that way.
I like that.
That way it's still Sunday. Get the next day off for the vast majority of people across America. Boom, ready to go.
You know what? I support that theory because I don't know if I want the Super Bowl on a Saturday. It would just feel weird, you know?
Yeah, it's not right.
Because the NFL's played on Sundays. I find it weird when there's like, we get to the end of the season, you're like, hey, triple header on Saturday. I go, oh, no. I'm out on this. I like your idea. Put it on President's Day so people can have the day off afterwards.
I'm out. It's an institution. It belongs on Sunday, and I like that tidy kickoff of 5:38 p.m.
Yeah, there you go. I think they should move it up like an hour, personally, but neither here nor there. From the 314, in or out, a trip to the NLDS this year would satisfy most Cardinals fans.
Me, it would
we brought this up last week, and I think the majority ended up saying yes. If they win in the wild card, lose 3-2 against the Dodgers or the Braves, and it was a competitive series, I think that would satisfy most Cardinals fans. It's a clear sign that you're going in the right direction, and things are better. Doesn't mean that things are fixed, but things are better than they were previously, and hopefully that would inspire the front office to go out there and do something drastic to change the rotation. I don't know that it would actually do that, but I'd say, and I think that would be considered something that would satisfy fans.
I think so. I think 65% of fans would be satisfied with that. I don't know if it would. I know it wouldn't be everybody, but I would say I'm in on this. I think most of the fan base realizes this is not a great team, but it's good enough to be in the playoffs. And if they get to the NLDS, I think fans would be satisfied.
I'm out because any satisfaction would be fleeting. And exactly that. You look ahead very quickly to the next season. You would turn the page to spring, and you would realize that, barring any unforeseen moves, in the rotation at least, you would have Sonny Gray still arguably operating at peak level. And then who's going to follow him? An older Miles Michaelis? You're really going to exercise the options on Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson? No, it would be too fleeting. I'm out.
In or out, guys, Christian McCaffrey is not only the best running back to be drafted in 2017, but the best running back to be drafted in the last 7 seasons. I think Christian McCaffrey is the best running back of this generation, personally.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I'd say I'm in on this. I think he is the best running back, to your point, in this generation. And I can't even think of, who would be even second. A lot of the guys that have been, highly drafted have dealt with some injuries. You think of Saquon Barkley. Barkley was great for 1 year with the Giants.
You're putting Derrick Henry in there?
He's been hurt. Oh, Henry, that's a good one. But I don't. He hadn't been drafted in the last 7 years, right? But he's definitely second, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm in on this. He's the best running. McCaffrey is the best running back that's been drafted in the last 7 years, and I agree with BK, the best running back of this generation.
I'm in on it too because of all of the facets to his game, and thankfully for him too. You kind of wondered as far as the trajectory of his career. He missed a lot of time early. He wasn't entirely available to the Carolina Panthers, which made it slightly easier, I think, to part with him. But now that he has been able to regain really relative health, and you see him out there still operating at the peak of his powers, no, he's very, very impressive.
I would say the best guys not named McCaffrey in this era were probably Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, and Alvin Kamara. Those are probably the ones that would come up next to him. And I should have also mentioned Derrick Henry. Throw him in there as well. I would say Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott. Probably something in that. That would be my top 5.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that order.
The last 12 years.
Yeah, I'd agree with that order.
If you want to go back further, Adrian Peterson would certainly be a part of that.
Yeah,
he'd be at number 1.
I forgot about Chubb because he missed all this year because of that big time leg injury that he suffered. But yeah, I would agree with it. And the part that makes McCaffrey stand out better than all those guys is he's elite running back, and as you saw last night, he can line up anywhere. I think he was lined up in the slot. He can line up out wide. They can throw the ball. He basically used as a true running back, like the Derrick Henry type, Nick Chubb type, and also as a legitimate wide receiver. And that's what makes him so special.
AK was as deadly as anyone for 2 to 3 seasons, but that was it. It's such a spurt there, and he has fallen off a cliff.
He couldn't line up as a wideout, right? I can't really remember.
He did.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
He did.
Okay. I know he was a good pass-catching running back, but I was thinking more if he'd start in the backfield, not so much like McCaffrey lined up in the slot.
That's Tanner Hendrickson. He's Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, I think if you're going to remember one thing about the last few Super Bowls for Patrick Mahomes, it's this. The guy's never dead. No matter what he gets down by early on, he's got an opportunity to come back. Is that going to be the lasting legacy for him whenever we look back on his career? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
We've got your chance to win a pair of passes to the 2024 State Farm Missouri Valley Conference Men's Basketball Tournament, hitting the court at Enterprise Center March 7th through March 10th. March begins here with the Arch Madness of the annual MVC Tournament, celebrating 30 years at Enterprise Center. All session and single session tickets are on sale now. Get all the details and get entered to win those free tickets for Arch Madness right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
You can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Chiefs work overtime to claim another Lombardi trophy. I'm Bradford Bruns, and this Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. 4 quarters were not sufficient to decide Super Bowl 58 between Kansas City and San Francisco. After 14 minutes, 57 seconds of the extra session, McCole Hardman reels in a 3-yard TD pass from Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs take it 25-22, becoming world champs for the 3rd time since 2020. Mahomes also earned MVP honors, throwing for 333 yards and recording 66 on the ground. Hockey, the Blues also find themselves riding high following back-to-back weekend wins over Buffalo and Montreal. Toronto's on the schedule tomorrow night with a puck drop of 6 on 101 ESPN. The Maple Leafs have lost 2 of 3 post-All-Star break. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
When we look back at Patrick Mahomes' career, and we have it in its entirety, one of the things that he's most going to be known for, T-Bone, is his ability to just never say die. He never feels like he's out of a game. This was the case early on in his career. When you look back at the 2020 postseason, coming off the 2019 season, 2020 postseason, you go into that game against Houston in the playoffs. They're down 24-0 prior to the end of, I think it's the end of the first quarter. They end up winning that game by 20 points, 51-31. You play against Tennessee in the AFC Championship game. You guys remember the run right before the half, right? They're down 17-7 in that one. They win 35-24. They end up winning that by double digits after being down by double digits as well. And then you get to the Super Bowl. You're down by double digits early. You're down by 3 points with 5 minutes to go. You end up winning 31-20. Every single game that postseason, they were down by double digits and won by double digits. That was the start of what we have now seen is a trend. You look back at the 13 seconds game against Buffalo. Buffalo thinks they've killed him, right? 13 seconds to go. Nobody's going to be able to go put together a drive to come back. He not only puts together the drive to tie it, then they go to overtime, wins it that way as well. They changed the rules. We go to overtime again yesterday. Finds a way to win it there. 2023, the drive to finish the game against Cincy. And last year in the Super Bowl, you remember that run that was able to set up, ultimately, the winning kick in that one as well. One of the most impressive aspects of what we have seen from Patrick Mahomes is just this ability to come from behind. The Chiefs, T-Bone, to put a fine point on this, are 5-1 when they trail by at least 10 points in any point during a playoff game. The rest of the NFL in this stretch is 6-48.
Wow.
When down by 10 plus at any point. Again,
says
he's
it all.
5-1. The rest of the NFL combined, 6-48. If you want to go a step further, Chiefs are now 9-2 in playoff games when they're down by a touchdown or more in the Mahomes era. 9-2. The next best quarterback, when down by at least 7 points, dating back to 1950 in a playoff game, is Tom Brady. He is 10-11. Mahomes is 9-2. The greatest quarterback that we had ever seen prior to Mahomes is 10-11. This is different, man. I don't know what the closest thing is for another sport. I would be curious if there is somebody that you guys have felt this way about. Maybe it is Jordan, but 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. I can't think of anybody else that I have more confidence in being down by a significant margin in their sport than I do with Patrick Mahomes right now in playoff games in his sport.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who the closest one is, but it's incredible because you're right. He's never out of a game. Like, the only time in Mahomes' career that I can at least point to and I can say that game I felt like he was out of was the Super Bowl loss to the Bucs. Outside of that, and they were down 21-6 at halftime, and that game kind of felt over, in my opinion, at that point. Outside of that, you never feel like he's out of it. We were talking behind the scenes during a commercial break that, when Mahomes got the ball in overtime, you never questioned if he was going to go win the games for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. You knew it was over for him. So he's just able to eventually figure it out. We've talked about it. San Francisco had him lost, it felt like, had the internal clock going in the first half. but he always eventually figures it out. He figures out what you're doing and how he can finally start to pick it apart. And that's a credit to him. It's a credit to Andy Reid, who helps him get through that as well, who's one of the best offensive minds of this generation. It's unbelievable. And I think one guy that I can say that I don't know if I ever felt this way because he would get his team to come back, but I always felt like in his prime, you knew where he was going to get the team to, and that's LeBron. You always knew LeBron could keep a team in it, could get the team back into it, and you always knew LeBron was destined to get to the NBA Finals during his prime. So that's who I would say he reminds me of.
I think I've got it. I think it's Tiger. Tiger was this guy in majors. If he was close anywhere on the leaderboard, if he was close on a Sunday,
if he lurked at all,
if he was anywhere over, and he was wearing the red polo, you knew. I don't know where he's at right now. Maybe he's 7th, maybe he's 5th, maybe he's 3rd, or leading. Whatever. Tiger's winning this tournament. There's no doubt in your mind. You go into Sunday, you place the bet, regardless of what the odds are, because you know Tiger ain't losing this one. And that's how I feel right now with Patrick Mahomes. If he's close late within a touchdown, like I had confidence in the fourth quarter yesterday that the Chiefs would win that game. And I think that was the predominant theme for people watching that game. As you're watching it and the Chiefs are down, you're like, yeah, they're going to win. You watch it, you see the 49ers kick the field goal, and you're like, oh, we all know how this ends. Patrick Mahomes is going to get the ball. He's going to take it the length of the field. He's going to score a touchdown, and the Chiefs will leave this game victorious. Because that's just what he does.
Yeah.
In a way that nobody else does. Like, Brady was the closest thing that I've seen to this, where you just never felt comfortable when you were having your team go up against his team. You're like, man, I don't know. I've got the heebie-jeebies over here. That guy is on the other sideline. It's to a different level with Patrick Mahomes, though. Brady was under 500 in these situations. Mahomes is like he's got an average that would be like a 14-3 record in the regular season when he gets into these scenarios.
I like the Jordan comp because it's probably the closest approximation we can compare football and basketball more favorably. BK, I love the Tiger point as well because you're talking about singular forces with the ball, with the club in their respective hands. They can change the complexion like nobody else. Now, to your point about Brady as well, there's simply nobody else like Mahomes in the sports landscape right now because I even remember this last season during the 2022 season. At this point in time, BK, you vouched for all the playoff stats. In any games, playoffs, regular season, whatever, when the Chiefs were trailing at any point by 10 points, first half, second half, didn't matter. Mahomes in those games still had a 59% winning percentage even when Kansas City had piled up that kind of deficit. How about Tom Brady throughout the entire course of his illustrious career, for as great as he was, for as much fear as he instilled in you, in the other squad, he only, the GOAT, only had a 37% winning percentage when trailing by 10 or more points.
Which is amazing, by the way.
I know, which is amazing.
Like that's an unbelievable
right now,
winning percentage.
To win Mahomes versus Brady in that department alone, they're actually in different stratospheres.
Yeah, it's really the thing that defines his career so far. You look at what he did yesterday. The last 6 drives of the game, and this is after I thought he played really poorly to start out the game. I want to make that clear, too, to any of our listeners that are, BK is such a home. No, I thought Mahomes, I mentioned it on Twitter, at BK Sports. Like, you can go back and find it. I think it's from like the second quarter, maybe mid-third. I didn't think Patrick Mahomes was playing all that well early on. And he's lucky that he has such a great defense that was able to make up for it. 49ers, couple of mistakes, the fumble, 2 fumbles, the missed PAT. It kept the Chiefs in the game, and it allowed for him to have that opportunity down the stretch. And so a lot of credit to Spags, a lot of credit to Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, a big couple of plays by Trent McDuffie. Like, they all deserve credit as well. But on the final 6 drives, it was 9 plays, 47 yards for a field goal, 4 plays, 24 yards, touchdown, 12 plays, 69 yards, field goal, 11 plays, 64 yards, field goal, and then 13 plays, 75 yards, and a touchdown on the final possession of the game. You just, nobody does that. Nobody. He was going up against a really good defense with the 49ers, and he made them look silly once he found what the adjustments were that he needed to make in the second half. So that's what we're going to remember from this game and from his first 6 years of his career. The dude was just never out of games. It didn't matter who he was going up against. It didn't matter who the quarterback or the coaches were on the other side. that dude is never out of it, no matter what.
And the part that's impressive, and it's why I said like how well he was playing in the postseason prior to the Super Bowl, even though his numbers were not gaudy in those games against Baltimore, in those games against Buffalo, it is, a lot of players will, I don't know if it's panic, but they feel like they got to have the big shot play, right? You get down 10 points, What do you got to do? You got to get the 30-yard, 40-yard throw deep down the field. Yeah.
Josh Allen special.
Josh Allen special, where you just heave it and go, man, I hope someone comes down with it. That's not Mahomes. I mean, you mentioned all those drives there. Every one of those is 9+ plays outside the one where they score on the muffed punt. It's just slow. It's methodical. If you give him a big shot, he'll take it, as you saw in the, first quarter where he has the deep ball down the field. Otherwise, he's just going to slowly pick you apart. He'll take his time, and if something opens up, he's willing to take it. But he's not going to force it down the field. He's willing to just dink and dunk his way down the field, and that's not a bad thing. That's smart football to work your way down.
I thought the coolest part, I love seeing all-time greats. This is basketball with Steph, LeBron, whoever. Baseball, you've got Albert Pujols coming up, bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, game on the line. Big-time closer, Mariano Rivera, coming into the game. You got the best player from the opposing team coming in, and he's got to get him out, otherwise you lose. Like these big-time clutch moments with everything on the line, the stakes never higher. This is what you think about when you're growing up, right? I don't know about you guys. I was a super mediocre basketball player growing up, and so you go out to the driveway, and I had a hoop out there, 3, 2, 1 for the game, right? And you just put up the shot, and BK clinked it again. And you're hoping that you're able to come through in the clutch. And so for Patrick Mahomes, I would imagine his entire life, he's dreaming of and thinking of, or whether it's Tom Brady, Mahomes, whoever the guy is, but in this scenario, it was Mahomes, game on the line, down by 3, gotta have it. And in that moment, in overtime yesterday, as he gets the ball, he became the first quarterback in the last 30 years to complete at least 8 straight passes with at least 27 rushing yards on any drive of any game. He did that on the overtime drive to win the football game in the Super Bowl. The first guy ever in the last 30 years to complete 8 straight passes and get you 27 yards on the ground in any drive in the last 30 years, and he did it to win the Super Bowl. And the touchdown pass was to McCole Hardman, who 2 weeks prior was the GOAT, was benched in the AFC Championship game, and he goes out there and catches the game-winning touchdown pass in the Super Bowl.
How poetic.
You can't write that kind of a script. The NFL literally didn't see that in their script. Mahomes had to write it. It's amazing. What we witnessed last night was historical in its nature. The Chiefs are officially a dynasty. Mahomes put the team on his back when it mattered the most. And Super Bowl champions once again, 3 times in the last 4 years, back-to-back. First time we've seen that happen in more than 20 years in the NFL as well. And next year, they're going to have an opportunity to become the first team ever to win 3 straight Super Bowls. Never been done before. Chiefs are going to have an opportunity to play for that next year. All right, coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer. I want to get T-Bone's thoughts on the halftime show last night.
Oh, boy.
He's got some strong opinions on what we witnessed from Usher. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
The Blues play on ESPN. The wait is over. Tomorrow night, Blues and Maple Leafs. Pre-game at 5, puck drop at 6.
Shoots, he scores!
This is your exclusive home for Blues hockey. 101 ESPN. back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trust wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Let's dive into the junk drawer. It is going to be labeled T-Bone hates everything that is good today. T-Bone, you had a problem with the halftime show last night, which I actually thought was totally fine. I didn't think there was anything that, like 10 years from now, I'm not necessarily going to remember a whole lot from that halftime show, but I thought it was fine.
It wasn't that great.
I thought they did a good job. It was memorable music from my childhood personally, and so of course that was... The entire show was geared towards me, Bradford, and Alex. Like, we were the target audience, and apparently Josh Ennis, who said earlier today, was geared towards him as well. You were not the target audience in any way possible. You're 12 years old. You weren't around when Usher was in his prime in the early to mid 2000s, so I'm not in any way shocked that you didn't care about the music. I'm a little surprised that you're hating on the performance as much as you are. I didn't think there was anything to hate on last night. I thought it was fine.
I just wasn't impressed. You know, after it started, I was like, okay, I'm going to go get some ice cream now. So I went and left, got some ice cream, came back, forgot I paused it, so I watched the rest of the halftime show. I don't know, like, his biggest song, the last one that he did, you know, I recognize that one. That was the only one that I honestly recognized from Usher. Because, again, like, I didn't grow up with Usher. I didn't listen to Usher.
Shame.
But he's like doing that song. He doesn't sing it all in the song. He leads it to the two rappers that are guest stars, which, okay, that's fine. And then he just up there like bouncing around, not singing along.
But that's the performance. That's what I'm confused by is like...
He's supposed to sing. It's a concert, essentially. That's what the halftime show is.
Have you ever gone to a concert where instead of singing, they will start performing on the stage?
Yes. I saw, who did I just see? Extreme this weekend. They were running around, dancing along, singing as well.
Okay.
Not like Usher.
Yeah, because Usher wasn't singing.
You know what, Tanner? This is my confession. You've got to let that halftime show burn because not only was Usher singing at times, this is a production, Tanner, okay? You can't tell
Bradford.
me. Okay, I agree with that. That's fine. I had it in the
You're above
holster.
what you just did.
I had it in the holster for a little bit. But the point remains, Tanner, that when you are dancing to that degree, when you have that esteemed choreography, you're not going to be singing every single word. Have you ever seen an individual move like that and then also roller skate in the middle of the field? The marching band, the guest stars, you had her on the guitar, you had Lil Jon in fine form, mind you.
You know what?
Ludicrous.
49ers win the damn Super Bowl. They don't got to wait 35 minutes for some halftime concert by Usher.
Alicia Keys.
Let's play some football.
I thought Alicia Keys was great as well. Did you...
I didn't even know that was her until I saw it on Twitter.
Oh, come on. Piano, baby.
I knew that was Alicia Keys, just to be clear. I knew most of them. I didn't realize who that was on guitar until I was like, man, who is this? This has to be somebody well known that I don't know. And then I saw on Twitter it was her. I was like, oh, okay. I get it now.
Dude, were you wondering, like, why aren't you saying her name? Why are you saying it was her? Which her?
I kind of had that moment, yeah.
What was the halftime show that you enjoyed? Because what I feel like what we're getting to here is T-Bone just hates halftime shows.
I don't know if there's one that I've liked. I just find it as a... I don't know. There's been people that I recognize, and sometimes I've been like, oh, okay, I wonder how they'll sound. But I never leave a halftime show going, that was the best 20 minutes I could have had for halftime. I've never left a halftime show going, that was really good.
Does it make you mad that that's the case?
Yes, because I want to enjoy something.
Well, what would they need to do in order to gear a halftime show? I'm scared to get into the mind of T-Bone here, but what would they have to put on?
I really don't know.
Do we need the Black Crows out there?
The Black Keys would be good if we're going to bring them back. Let's put them on stage.
Would Creed do it for you?
Maybe, depending on what they did. If they're going to be doing the Usher where they're not even singing, they're just out there dancing and rollerblading.
So you basically want them to get back to the Aerosmith and that Coldplay. Remember that? It was a 10-year stretch after the Janet Jackson situation where it was just exclusively
safe.
What is the safest possible halftime show? That is T-Bone's lane.
Yes.
This one was miles ahead of last year's show. With all due respect,
Petty. You'd
Rihanna
love the Tom Petty show. Do you remember the Tom Petty show?
No, what year was Tom Petty?
He was, I think, 08, something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't even remember that Super Bowl. Who was in that one? I was 8 at the time.
What were your thoughts when The Weeknd ventured through his house of mirrors?
See, that one...
That one was just...
The reason why I liked it is because it's memorable. You can say that, and I remember exactly what it was. From last night, yes, there was a roller skates, and there were a couple of moments where you've got the special guests that are coming out there. That was all cool, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good performance overall. There wasn't as much that's like, this is the memorable piece to your performance, right? Yeah. And I felt the same way about Justin Timberlake. Like, there was nothing about Justin Timberlake's performance that I was like, oh, that was really excellent. It was fine. It was fine. Nothing more, nothing less. He went on there, he did all of his hits, and we all kind of went home afterwards.
Bruno had the fireworks. That was
Bruno
cool.
was great. I thought Bruno was really good. I think if you're going to do a halftime performance, at least for me, the stuff that I really enjoy is, man, do something that's going to be memorable. Do something that's different than what you could do in a concert that you put on. I feel like Usher just put on a 25-minute concert, which ain't that bad, and he brought out some cool guests. I was good with it, but I didn't think it was something that 10 years from now, if we look back on it, we're going to rate it particularly high compared to some of the others that we will see in future years.
I will not be high on my list. I remember the Weeknd one. Like, I like the Weeknd. I like some of their songs, but I remember, like, leaving that going, what are we doing right now? That's how I left that halftime show.
I thought Shakira was really good. I thought Bruno was really good.
By the way, when
Beyonce,
was Bruno?
I thought had a good one. Was that 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I don't remember.
Black Eyed Peas, not so much.
Yeah. Prince was excellent.
Purple Rain in the Rain, that's memorable.
That was pretty excellent. So there's been some really good ones in recent years. I thought last night was a 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. Thought it was good. I enjoyed it. Liked the music. Brought back some good memories from me whenever I was like a 14-year-old dummy little kid. It was good.
My ice cream got a higher rating than the halftime show.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. By the way, something that was underrated from last night was the commercials. A genuinely good year for commercials on that.
I was not impressed with that either.
Of course you weren't.
Like, I never
what
felt
made you happy? What makes you happy?
I won a couple bets last night. That's what made me sleep at night. I didn't think the commercials were all that good.
Really? I thought we had like 4 or 5 really good ones, and that's all I need. Just give me a few really good ones.
I
feel like in recent years it's been like horrible, really bad
what were the
commercials.
ones you liked?
I liked the one from what's it called, Duncan. I thought that one was excellent.
See, I wasn't impressed with the Duncan.
What?
Too many celebs.
Why?
I don't know. I felt cringe.
The Brady BetMGM one I thought was really good. Everybody can win other than Brady. I thought that was a good one.
Brady is gold.
The Schwarzenegger one I thought was really good.
I wasn't impressed with that one.
Walken.
The Paramount Plus one I thought was really good.
The one with the throw the child.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
Okay, so those two I agree.
With Creed.
I thought that was it. That's all.
Oh, well, see, I want
4 or
more.
5.
I did like the NFL. What was it? The YouTube TV one where you had the players just like the birds.
Yeah.
Outside that though, like I was like, oh man, I want to leave with like 10 memorable commercials, and I walked out with like 3 maybe.
I mean, I feel like that's where we're at though with Super Bowl commercials.
So we got to quit lowering our expectations.
20 years ago, you got solid 10 to 12 that you go on the air the next day and you're like, these were fantastic.
Yeah,
Plus, Budweiser was always good for one. You always knew E-Trade was going to have one that was really good that hit. Doritos a lot of the time would have one. Snickers would have one. And now it's just like, they've got other ways to spend it.
So now it used to be like you could never go to the bathroom except for the halftime show during the Super Bowl. Now you can go whenever because who cares? The commercials aren't very good.
Is you can watch all of these the next day.
Exactly.
15, 20 years ago, you had to watch them on television. Otherwise, how are you going to be able to watch them again? Now, the moment that they're on television, you can go watch them on Twitter or on YouTube, and you've got the opportunity to go watch them that way as well. So it's just
expectations.
It's changed so much. Coming up next, how are we going to remember this Chiefs defense? What is that going to be remembered by? Is it an all-time unit? Is it just merely a good one? How will this go down? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. Every month during the season, you can check out either the 101 mobile app or 101ESPN.com for your chance to get entered to win for a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues home game at Enterprise Center. New winners picked every month throughout the season for free tickets to see the Blues in action, courtesy of 101 ESPN. Get entered to win now online at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. exclusive home of St. Louis Blues hockey. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, 101 ESPN. This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
It's clear. Patrick's the best player I've ever seen. Steve Spagnuolo is the best big game defensive coordinator I've ever seen. I think he's one of the best in the history of the NFL.
That was Dan Orlovsky on ESPN earlier today. I think there's going to be a really interesting discussion when Steve Spagnuolo retires surrounding his Hall of Fame case. You don't really get coordinators into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but he now has an opportunity to do something nobody else has. I mean, he's the first defensive or offensive coordinator in NFL history to win 4 different Super Bowls, and he's done so with different teams and different defenses and in different ways. So Spags is one of those guys that when we look back on the Chiefs' run, you're going to remember Mahomes, you're going to remember Kelsey, you're going to remember Andy, and then after that, like, there will be bit pieces, right? Chris Jones will be on that list. L'Jarius Sneed maybe will be on that list. Previously, Frank Clark, Tyreek Hill. You're going to remember all of these different names. I hope Spags doesn't get lost in the shuffle, because what he has done for this team is extend their runway. They don't win these Super Bowls without him, man. They're not, I'm not even sure they're getting to as many Super Bowls without Steve Spagnuolo. What they did this postseason is up there with some of the best runs that we've seen by a defense in the last 25 years. If you're looking at the teams that had a better points per game in the postseason than the Chiefs, it's the 2000 Ravens, the 2002 Buccaneers, the Tampa 2 Bucks, the 2013 Legion of Boom Seahawks, the 2011 Giants, that was Steve Spagnuolo's defense, and then the 2015 Denver Broncos that carried Peyton Manning to his final Super Bowl in a Broncos uniform. What we're talking about here, man, is something that's pretty special, and I'm curious. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, and the YouTube chat is youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. T-Bone, how do you think this defense is going to be remembered? Are we going to remember them as, like, one of the best that we've seen in recent years? Is this run just going to be remembered for Mahomes? How are we going to look at this, 10, 15 years down the road?
So I think for this defense to be remembered, you almost have to see like a repeat performance about it. Because like a lot of those teams that you mentioned, like the Legion of Boom, when you brought them up, they were the Legion of Boom for what, like a 5-year stretch, if I remember correctly. Like, now they didn't get to they got to what, 2 Super Bowls together? But like when I think Legion of Boom, I think not just like a one-time thing. And that's why it's going to be tough for, I think, this defense to really be remembered, because there's a chance Chris Jones is walking out the door. He's probably not coming back for Kansas City. L'Jarius Sneed, whether or not they bring him back, the jury's still out on that. I think that's the reason why the defense, though it shouldn't get overlooked, because you're right, it is a very good defense, and honestly, it really helped get Mahomes to the Super Bowl, and then Mahomes took off from there, I'm just not sure it's not going to stick together. Now, if they're really good next year after losing potentially Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed, now we're talking. Now you're going to hear where people are going to try and come up with names for what this defense is. It won't be the Legion of Boom. It'll be who knows what we'll call it. But I think that's what you have to see for this defense to be remembered.
To me, the conversation about the legacy here of Spags, it's really, really compelling. And the stats, the numbers, all the accomplishments, they're really indisputable at this point. Now, BK, has he done enough in talking about maybe leapfrogging some of the most esteemed defensive minds of his time and predecessors too, guys like Jim Johnson, okay, guys like Monty Kiffin, Dick LeBeau? Has he put himself in another realm now, Spags, that is?
So you said Dick LeBeau. I think that's what we're talking about here in terms of the pantheon of coordinators on that side of the ball of the last 20 to 25 years. I think it's Dick LeBeau, and I think it's Spags. And the thing with Spags is, like, so much of what we talk about in the NFL is predicated on what were the rings, right? Coaches and quarterbacks, that's what we talk about, is what did you do in the playoffs, because that's where you really make your money. And for Spags, I'm not sure there's been a better defensive mind not named Bill Belichick than Steve Spagnuolo in the last 25 years. And he's doing this in an era where it's never been harder to be a defensive mind in the NFL. So I've got to give a little bit of credit there. Like, if I'm going to kind of tamp down the numbers for quarterbacks and receivers, which I think we need to do because it's like inflation, right? It just always continues to go up. The price of business is always going to go up. Yeah. the yardage in the NFL is just continuing to go up year after year after year. It used to be crazy to have a 4,000-yard passer. Now, like the 20th best quarterback in the league is throwing for 4,000 yards. Baker Mayfield is throwing for that for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So in order to adjust for that on the defensive side of the ball, I also have to look at it and say, man, when we've got a defense that's performing like this, I'm going to give them a little extra credit. I'm going to give the Seahawks of the 2010s a little extra credit for being that dominant in an era where everything in the NFL, rules, adjustments, everything was going towards the offensive side of the ball. That being said, I think the Patriots of the early 2000s are instructive of how we're going to remember these defenses. People don't look back on those early 2000s Patriots, general fans, right? And say to themselves, oh, think about the defenses. They say it was Brady.
Yeah.
Because Brady's what we remember. Brady got to 7 wins in the Super Bowl, and so that's the headliner. They talk about Brady and Belichick. And yes, Belichick is the head of the defense, but we don't think of it that way. We just think of the head coach, right? So I think when we look back at this year's Super Bowl run for the Chiefs, we'll remember Patrick Mahomes rising above his wide receivers, the defense stepping up when it needed to, and the Chiefs finding a way in what was their worst team in the Mahomes era to be able to win a Super Bowl. I think pretty far down that list will be a discussion of how great this defense was. And I think that's unfortunate because this defense was truly spectacular, especially when you think about who they went up against. The Dolphins averaged 29 points per game this year. So did the 49ers. The Ravens were at 28. The Bills were at 27. By some of the advanced numbers, DVOA, fancy nerdy number that I like, it was the hardest path to a Super Bowl in the history of the NFL. And that's not me saying that as a fan of the team. That's a neutral, objective number based on DVOA that's saying this was the most difficult path ever by a team to get to and win a Super Bowl. So I think we should remember it maybe a little more fondly than we do, but I don't think it's going to be remembered that way because of the headliner being Andy, Mahomes, Kelsey, Taylor Swift, and then eventually you get to the defense and what they were able to do.
Would that have changed? I think back to the Baltimore game, the Miami game, and Buffalo game. Those 3 games, though I think Mahomes played pretty well in those games, I could argue those games were won because of the defense. You couldn't look at Mahomes throwing for 300-plus yards in those games and say Mahomes was by far the biggest reason they won that football game. I think the defense was the biggest reason they won those games. Look at how they played against Baltimore in that game. If Mahomes doesn't go for 300-plus yards and doesn't play at a superstar level for the final quarter and in overtime, I think maybe then we're having a bit of a different conversation, because I think Mahomes stole the spotlight by the way he played last night. I don't think in the playoff run, I think he was good, but he wasn't great. And last night he was great in the game that matters the most. So I think if he was more just kind of how he played in those previous 3 playoff games, I think maybe we have more of a conversation around the defense. But I think you're right. They get overshadowed by the name of Mahomes because he is now in that conversation of the GOAT.
I also think the way the Chiefs go about it defensively is not conducive to talking about them. The 2002 Buccaneers, what I remember about that Super Bowl against the Raiders, 2 turnovers. Turnovers and touchdowns scored by the defense. And when you do that, yeah, we're going to be talking about that side of the ball instead of the offense. When you look back to the 2000 Ravens, they allowed 6 points per game in the playoffs. That is a different level of dominance than anything else that we've seen in the 21st century. The Seahawks, they literally had a name, or they had a nickname named after them, the Legion of Boom. We don't have that for these Chiefs, and they did it over a sustained period of time. So I think you have to get to that level and not have an all-time great quarterback to remember that Super Bowl run for the defense. Because the other ones that we remember are the Steelers when they did it early on with Big Ben, or you look at what the Giants were able to do with Eli. The defenses were really the headline of those stories as well. And then you got to do it with sacks. You got to do it with interceptions, turnovers, touchdowns. If you got all those different things, that becomes the headline. The Chiefs didn't have that. The Chiefs were just suffocating. They'd allow you to get a little bit of yardage early on in the first, second quarter maybe. And then after that, Spags would make a couple of adjustments, and it was like a python that was just squeezing the life out of you offensively. That's not sexy. That doesn't get headlines. And it's one of the things that I think people overlooked going into this game. And it's why I don't think that we're going to remember them for that moving forward.
If you can retain one or both, Jones and or Snead, given how young this unit is and how much growth is still available, what is the ceiling or the upside for this unit under Spags as currently constituted? You replenish a bit through the draft. Let's say that 1 or 2 of those guys actually come back. How far can they go?
T-Bone, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Who would you bring back? If I said, hey, it's going to be, I think Snead's going to be a little cheaper, but if we just, for the sake of the argument, said it's similar in terms of the contracts that you're going to have to spend next year, and you can have either Snead or Jones, but you can't bring both back because they can't. Like, it's just going to cost too much money. Who would you prioritize this offseason?
I think I would do
It's a good question, Bradford.
I think I would do Snead because I think based on how you see Spags likes to disguise their blitzes and bring different kind of blitz packages, they may not end up having a number one rusher when they lose Chris Jones, but they can continue to blitz and continue to add more pressure because you can rely on Snead to play man-to-man defense on the outside, at that cornerback position. So I think I would bring back Snead because I think you can still do more if you have shutdown course. If you have like the Lions secondary, for example, you're better off not blitzing. So I think it would be Snead for me.
That's what I would do as well. And it's crazy to say that. I know the numbers won't indicate it, but last night Chris Jones was dominant, man.
He was.
Yeah.
If you don't have a couple of his pressures, like there's a play where Brandon Ayuk just immediately went off the line of scrimmage. It was in the red zone. I think it was a third down, if I'm not mistaken. And Chris Jones is able to get pressure and makes it difficult on Brock Purdy. Can't find him, has to throw it too early, and it should have been a touchdown. And because of the pressure from Chris Jones, he wasn't able to get it there. Another play was a screen pass that Jones just completely blew up, and then they're able to recover. It takes a little bit extra time to get the ball to the screen, and then the linebacker's right there to be able to make like a 5-yard loss. It just wrecked their drive again. Those are the kinds of plays that Jones is capable of making, that when you have that interior pressure, it is damn near impossible to be able to recover as a quarterback. It's what used to always give Tom Brady trouble, get interior pressure. Yeah, easier said than done. Like, there's 3 guys in the league that can actually do that against him. So it's hard to not prioritize that, but L'Jarius Snead is what makes this defense go, man. Those 2 corners being able to play press man coverage, and Steve Spagnuolo, who is one of the best defensive coordinators in the business, for him to just get creative with everything else he's doing. You don't know who's coming. You don't know who's dropping. You don't know how many guys are going to be coming on any given play. The safeties will rotate from cover 2 to cover 1 and then back to cover 2 again. It makes your life as a quarterback and a head coach an absolute nightmare going up against this defense because of what the corners allow them to do. Spags has never had that in Kansas City. He's had guys that are really good on the D-line. Never has he had the corners that make his life this easy. I think you got to prioritize L'Jarius Snead going into the offseason. So if they're able to retain him, and I think they will, it's going to make things difficult. And this is why I said earlier, Bradford, you asked the question. It's a fair one of like, are they going to get better from here? I don't know. Because it was hard to say after they trade Tyreek Hill, you get better now. No, they don't. They get different. They now suddenly, instead of being one of the best offenses we've ever seen, they become a more well-rounded football team, and maybe that allows for more sustained success. I don't think you get better by getting rid of Chris Jones. That's a big-time player to lose. He's like a top 15 player in all of football. But you get different. And maybe with the $30 million that you're not spending on Chris Jones, you reallocate that, right? And so you go out, you get a better left tackle this offseason, which makes life a little easier on Patrick Mahomes. Maybe you sign T. Higgins or whoever a second-tier wide receiver is, and now life, again, is a little easier on Mahomes offensively. So now your defense is, instead of being top 2 in the NFL, maybe it's 10th in the NFL. And then your offense, instead of being 18th in the NFL, is like 7th. So now you're top 10 on both sides of the ball. You just reallocate those resources elsewhere. I don't know if that means you're better, but I think it makes it more sustainable for winning long term, if that makes sense.
And if you would trust any coordinator on that side of the ball to perhaps operate at first with slightly lesser talent or one less magnificent presence, you give those reins to Spags, and then as his defenses so often do, they evolve and they continue to get better as the season and the years progress.
That is Bradford Bruns. He's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get into some of the other ancillary pieces of this year's Super Bowl. But next, I want to get back to the Blues, guys, because what we saw over the weekend was yet another reminder of what the Blues have in net and why maybe it's okay to dream a little bit on this team. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with the First Community pre- and post-game show driven by Clement Ford. And catch every Blues home game from the First Community Terrace.
Bring out the Zamboni!
Hey, it's BK, and I got to tell you about our friends over at Circa Sportsbook, Illinois. This is sports betting the way that it should be. They are the largest sportsbook in Las Vegas, and now they are available for you in the state of Illinois. The Circa Sports app is sports betting the way that it should be, and what I mean by that is they've got the tight money line splits. So if you bet last night, for example, in the big game on the Chiefs, you got a little bit more bang for your buck if you bet that over on the Circa Sportsbook than you would have by going elsewhere. They recommend going out, check the menu elsewhere, check what other options are for you, and I bet you you're going to find that Circa Sportsbook has the best prices for you. And right now, they already have some things available for you on the NCAA tournament, whether you want to bet on somebody to make it to the Final Four, you want a futures bet there. If you're just starting to think about, okay, I got to start watching some of these games, you want to see what happens once we get to the month of March, make sure you're watching those games, because when we get there, you're going to be wanting betting on the Circa Sportsbook in Illinois. So download the app today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
That'll do it. Bring out the Zamboni. A great road trip so far for the Blues. A 7-2 victory over the Montreal Canadiens. And the St. Louis Blues are 28-21-2 after 2 games on this road trip.
That's what it sounded like right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN yesterday. Blues start 2-0 in the second half of the season. A couple of wins on the road trip alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Guys, what we saw over the weekend was a lot of secondary scoring, an impressive performance from Torrey Krug as well. Jake Neighbors with the Gordie Howe hat trick. All of that was impressive. We talked about a lot of it early on today. I don't want to overlook, though, the goaltending that the Blues continue to get this season out of both Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer. T-Bone, I got to give a little credit where it's due. This is something that Alex Ferrario has been mentioning a lot this season is, hey, the Blues might have one of the best goaltending tandems in the league. And I said, I don't know that you can have one of the best goaltending tandems in the league if you don't have a top 5 goaltender in the league. We good? And I still am not sure that Binnington is that. But when you have 2 guys that are performing like they're top 12-ish, that might be enough, man, to get yourself into the conversation among the best goaltending tandems in the NHL. Where do you fall on that right now, T-Bone, and what they're getting in net?
Yeah, I think they are one of the best tandems in the NHL. I mean, you look at what they're doing, and Binnington's been incredible. And I questioned if he was going to be a regular season goalie coming into the season, of, we always knew he could take his game to the next level in the playoffs. It was always up in the air if he could do this in the regular season. And he's now doing it. And I think there's been things that you can point to this season for the Blues that you say, okay, maybe they found like the formula they've been looking for. For example, outside goaltending, I think they found what works for Torrey Krug. You got to have a stay-at-home defenseman with him in Matthew Kessel. I think they found that if they have a goalie that can help shelve the load from Jordan Binnington and a Joel Hofer, then you can keep Binnington fresh, and Binnington can be a regular season goalie. And those two they've got to be a top 5 tandem, I would think, here in the NHL. And they are the reason that if you're going to hold out hope for the Blues to get into the playoffs, or if you think they can go on a playoff run, they're the reason why. Because I don't think defensively they've been better defensively, but they still give up a lot of chances. They do hold teams to the outside a little bit more, but the goalies are making big-time saves this year when they need them. Because every game it feels like there is a 10-minute, 5-minute stretch where you go, holy cow, they're going to give up one here, because it's all on their end of the ice. The Blues do not possess the puck. They are not a offensive zone time team. The other team is the team that's doing that. They basically absorb the blows and then somehow find a way to score a goal. And the reason that they're able to do that is because Binnington and Hofer have been carrying them. The numbers will tell you, like, the way they were playing lately, I think they're winners of, 7 of their last 8 or 8 of their last 9. They shouldn't be. They haven't played. The advanced numbers do not say they've played well. But their goaltending is giving them a chance and allowing for the offense to get 1 or 2 of those good bounces. And the next thing you know, you go from a team that should be down 2-0 to a team that's leading 2-0.
They are a team right now that is leaning on their goaltending in a significant way. And I had said previously, it's one of the reasons why I'm skeptical of whether or not this team can continue. I didn't know if it was sustainable. I'm still questioning it. I don't know if it's sustainable, but I'm starting to be where I was with the Blues defensive core in, 2022, when they went to the playoffs with Nick Leddy as a part of their top 4 for the first time. They had traded for him at the deadline. The numbers didn't think that defensive core was very good that season either, and they didn't think that the Blues were getting enough quality shots. And I was like, okay, well, I understand that, but at a certain point, the results have to matter. Like, there has to be something here that maybe the numbers aren't capturing. And so I do wonder if we're starting to see that with the Blues goaltending, where it's like, hey, maybe this is just an outlier. It's an outlier season. The Cardinals had that pitching-wise back in 2015, where it was just an outlier season. They were awesome, and all of the numbers indicated, hey, this is going to regress. There's not a way for this to be sustainable. And it was. They found a way for 162 to be the best run prevention team in all of baseball. So coming up, you have a game in Toronto, a game at home against Edmonton, another one against Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton. All of that is before the end of this month. This is where we're really going to see them be tested for this specific aspect of the team. You should be able to score on some of these teams, but does your defense, does your goaltending hold up against the best teams in the NHL? We've seen it happen more often than not. I want to see it tested one more time, and if it does, and we get through those right before the deadline, man, at a certain point in time, I've just got to become a believer in what they're doing.
And while you only have one set of back-to-backs for the rest of the month, you do look at the schedule. It is rather heavy. And I don't even know, BK, if we would be talking about this outlier and how it has worked in the Blues' favor in net, were it not for the coaching staff's decision to be able to, over the last couple of months, basically come up with that ratio of Binnington to Hofer starts 2-1. Because as Alex has said on many different occasions, we know that for stretches, absolutely, regular season, especially in the playoffs, Binnington has been more than capable of carrying this team. And yet, early on in the season, after that first month or so, just think about how many games he had to start, how many games that he had to come into after Hofer originally had scheduled. It has been flipped in that sense. So when you have both guys, nobody getting overly taxed, that makes a huge difference.
That's a really good point. And it's something I probably haven't given enough credit for. In the last 21 games, you've seen Binnington start 13 and Hofer start 8. That's a really nice split. And if that continues the rest of the way, I think you're going to get the best version of Jordan Binnington. I've said this all along, and this is not a shot against Benner. Some pitchers are meant to throw 150 innings. Others are meant to throw 200 innings, right? I think Binnington is a guy that it's like kind of Jacob deGrom-ish, where, hey, you get 120 to 150 innings out of him, you hope. And when he's out there, he's going to be really good. But he's not somebody that's going to go start in the NHL for Benner like 60 games. You don't want that because by the end of the season, he's running on fumes and you get to a place where you're getting diminishing returns. If you've got a really nice 1B to his 1A in your net, I think you get the best out of Bennington. And right now, you're getting really strong performances out of Joel Hofer, so you don't need to push it. You don't need to go out there and be like, hey, against Toronto and Edmonton, we need Benner and net for both of those. And then hopefully we can hope and pray that we get something of substance on Saturday out of Hofer. You could conceivably start Bennington in one of these games, Hofer in the other, and find a way to win both of them. That's in play, which is a really nice thing to have as a coach.
And I don't... Have they had that guy with Bennington since Bennington took over after the Cup run? Like, I mean, last year they did not. We knew they didn't have it with Thomas
Allen
Greiss.
was that guy for him.
Okay, yeah, Allen was there for a little bit. I forgot. I couldn't remember who the goalie was that was there. But I don't know. Was he playing? Yeah, that 1 year. But at that point, that was more
they had, literally flipped.
Yeah, at that point,
it
was Bennington was playing so bad they almost had to go to Husso. I don't think we've seen the Blues have a 1-2 punch like this since the Cup run, because Allen was good, but I don't know if he was ever great.
Good point. It's the first time that you've seen both of them playing well.
Yeah.
Where you have both Benner and the backup playing at a high level together.
Sure. Yeah, because Allen would go through stretches where he'd play well, but there was also stretches where he didn't look good. This is the first time you've seen it for not just a spurt, I would call it. This is a sustained stretch now. This is since, the Christmas break that these guys have played really well, and it's what allows them to kind of do what we're talking about, that 13-8 split, keep both of them fresh. And honestly, it makes you feel really good if you get to the playoffs, because how many times do you see where one team, all of a sudden, their top goalie goes through that cold spell, which is eventually going to happen for every goaltender, and then they have nobody they can turn their back to. They have nobody that you feel comfortable with. With the Blues, if Bennington went through a cold stretch in the playoffs, which I wouldn't expect because he takes his game to the next level in the playoffs, you have Joel Hofer, and I'd feel pretty good about that.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can check us out on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL. That's where the graveyard is. The chat over there, very active today. You guys can watch that via the studio cams, which are powered by the Air Alliance team. In 15 minutes, we'll hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind, but coming up next, we got to dive into some NFL quick hitters, including the decision by Kyle Shanahan to take the ball starting overtime and a couple of the other underrated pieces of last night's game. We'll get to all of that next here on 101 ESPN.
Coverage of 101 ESPN is presented by Under Law Injury Lawyers. GetJim.com. Blues hockey is on 101 ESPN, and BK and Ferrario have you covered. Tune in every Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for the latest Blues news as BK and Ferrario broadcast live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light for the fans on game day, and by E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Text us anytime at 314-399-9646 on the Air Comfort Service Heating, Cooling, and Insulation text line on 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Canadians can't keep up with Krug. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Yesterday afternoon in Montreal, Torrey Krug powered the Blues attack with 5 assists. Jordan Kyrou also scored twice as the Note prevailed 7-2. St. Louis could make it 3 straight by downing Toronto tomorrow. The Maple Leafs are 4th in the Atlantic Division, tied with Detroit with 60 points. Next NFL season, the Chiefs will target their 4th title of the Patrick Mahomes era. Kansas City claimed Super Bowl 58 versus San Francisco 25-22. Mahomes was named MVP last night. Travis Kelce caught 9 passes for 93 yards. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at Londoff.com and LondoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Let's start with the 2 decisions that are getting a lot of scrutiny for the 49ers overnight. T-Bone in the Super Bowl yesterday. The big one that people are discussing this morning is Kyle Shanahan. I guess this afternoon now. This show has flown by. Kyle Shanahan taking the ball to start overtime. They win the coin flip. And for people that aren't familiar with the way that the new rules go, each team is guaranteed to have at least 1 possession in overtime during the playoffs now. And if the first team scores a field goal, for example, the other team can end it by getting a touchdown. If the first team scores a touchdown, the other team then gets the ball. If they score a touchdown as well, they can either kick the PAT, we go to a 3rd possession, or they can go for 2 and win the game right there. It's kind of the way that it works. Kyle Shanahan decided going into overtime, hey, if we win this coin toss, I want the ball to start things out. T-Bone, what did you make of the decision then? Do you still feel the same way now?
I still feel the same way now. I don't mind the idea of taking the ball first, but if you are going to take the ball first, you need to be playing for a touchdown and not a field goal. I thought the biggest mistake he made was settling for the field goal on 4th and 4 from the Kansas City 9, because the whole thought process, and he even said it like we were playing for the 3rd possession. Okay, that's fine. And like, I get your defense was just on the field. I'm not even going to question that. They went on a long drive to rest up the defense to hopefully try and get that stop against Mahomes. But it's clear you haven't been able to stop Mahomes. It was probably clear going into overtime you weren't going to stop Mahomes. So if that's the case, you've got to go for it on 4th and 4. You've got to go for it. And when you score a touchdown, and you brought this to my attention, and I didn't even think about it until we were talking earlier in the show, you got to go for 2-point conversion as well to really put the heat on Patrick Mahomes.
You're going to be criticized, though. Would you have criticized him for going for 2 in that spot?
I wouldn't have, because I would have understood what he was doing.
Even if it didn't work. And then Mahomes ends up scoring a touchdown, kicking a field or a PAT, and you go home.
I wouldn't have criticized him, because I think you almost have to. It's like the conversation we have about when you play like in college football, when you're playing the number 1 team in the country, you got to do everything you can. You got to throw every dart at the wall, and you've got to just go full punch.
Criticized Dan Campbell for doing this stuff 2 weeks ago. It's hard for me to believe that you wouldn't have criticized Kyle Shanahan for being aggressive.
I understood what Kyle Shanahan was trying to do by taking the ball. That's what the Dan Campbell decision, I don't even have a tough time remember. Oh, it was because he went for it. They had the lead, and instead of kicking the PA or the field goal to go up by 2 scores, they're up by 1 score with no momentum, and they won 4 on 4th down. I thought that didn't make sense. I thought you got to take the points in that scenario. Here, I understand what he's doing if you're going to take the ball and go score a touchdown and go for 2, because I thought his whole thought process was, okay, our defense can't get a stop. And then if we, say Mahomes then comes down, we've scored our touchdown, we've scored our 2-point conversion, they do the exact same thing. All they need is a field goal at that point to win the football game.
Yeah.
The problem I had was when he decided, when you go through this whole thought process and then you say, boop, brakes on, we got to kick the field goal. You lost the football game.
I totally agree with you. You have to go for the tutty. You have to go for the win right there. I didn't have a fundamental problem with Shanahan and the 49ers opting to receive the ball, but inevitably, Patrick Mahomes is getting the ball at least once. Inevitably, he's catching fire. BK, you spouted off the statistics earlier about what he did on that final drive. If he's getting the ball, he's getting the ball next, and he is going to lead the Chiefs into the end zone. You have to step on the throw there as much as possible. McCaffrey had been absolutely motoring along. He had 6 carries. They threw it to him in the flat 2 different times. Go for it on 4th down, spread everybody out, and see what happens. You don't even have to go for 2, but you have to put it in the end zone and tack on the extra point.
I wouldn't have gone for 2 on the first drive. I wouldn't have taken the ball on the first drive. I thought they made a mistake in doing so. I've seen all of this about the third possession. They weren't getting a third possession. The only scenario in which the 49ers were going to get the ball again is if Mahomes, if you thought he was going to fail and he was going to have to settle for a field goal there, they would have gone for 2. The Chiefs would have. They've said as much. They've said their plan in those scenarios, if we get the ball second, is to go for 2. We've got a play that's drawn up ready to go for us. And that's the smart way to go about it. Because you've got a 60% chance, let's say. I'm not trying to get like nerdy with numbers. It's just how they'll probably look at it. 60% chance to score the 2-point conversion. Do I have that good of odds to be able to stop the other team again and then go score on my own? Probably not. Your winning probability goes down significantly. So I thought it was a mistake to take the ball first. I think you try to get as much information as possible. Now, I will add this. This is where it's hard because it's kind of like in baseball where the manager has to have the feel of his team, right? His defense had just been on the field for the final 2 minutes of that game. They looked kind of gassed. The prior possession before that was almost a 6-minute drive by the Chiefs. They did not look as good. And so if you're saying, hey, we need to take our defense off of the field, and then their offense was out there for 7.5 minutes. So goal accomplished, mission accomplished in that regard. We got to have some way to be able to get our defense off the field, get them rested, so maybe they'll have a chance to be able to stop Patrick Mahomes. I do understand that. I still would have sent them out there first. Because you get a little bit of time between the end of the first half and the start of overtime as well. Get yourself situated, get back out there. Defense, go get them stopped. If you can't, we'll go out there with our offense. And now we know we got to be hyper aggressive. Every 4th down, we got to be going for it. They didn't decide to do that. I thought it was a mistake by Kyle Shanahan.
Do you think the Chiefs would, if they got the ball first, since you mentioned this, it made me think, if they get the ball first, they score a touchdown, they go in for 2, or they kick the PAT?
No chance they're kicking the PAT. Andy Reid's not that aggressive. He only does that when he's forced to. If he's forced into a situation where I need to do this right now, he'll go for it. But otherwise, like, you saw it in this game. He's not going to go for it on 4th and 3, 4th and 2, 4th and 1 inside of his own end. I thought yesterday, and this would have been hyper aggressive, and T-Bone would have crushed him had he not been able to get it. But the 4th and 1 inside of their own 20-yard line, I think it was, I would have gone for it there. I thought they made a mistake
really crushed
in not doing that early on. So they didn't. They ended up punting it. It worked out for them. But those are the kinds of things that Andy's just never going to do that. Andy and Kyle are both typically pretty conservative with these kinds of decisions.
This conversation, I got to see Dan Campbell in overtime for once in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next thing up. There's a piece down on ESPN.com earlier today from our guy Nick Wagner. He used to work here in St. Louis covering the Rams. Now he's covering the 49ers in San Francisco. He asked the question, is the 49ers title window now closed? T-Bone, they've got some big contracts that are on the books. They've got some big questions that need to be answered. They've got an extension for Brandon Ayuk that should get done this offseason. That's going to make things a little more difficult financially. And then the next offseason is when Brock Purdy's up for an extension. And at this point, you got to extend him. He's going to get $45, $50 million a year. Is this the end of their window, in your opinion, or do they still have more time left? For this version of the 49ers.
This version, I would say they've got 1 more year, I think, and then it's going to get really difficult. When they got to start paying Brock Purdy, that's when tough decisions are going to start to come. But next year, I think next year is the final hope for the San Francisco 49ers. This version of them, I think they're always going to have a window. I mean, you mentioned this where Kyle Shanahan's 0-3 in the Super Bowl. That guy's going to win a head coach. You give him 10-plus years in San Francisco, at some point, somehow, he's going to find a way to get you a Super Bowl title, as long as Mahomes isn't on the other side. I think next year with the current group they have is kind of the last hurrah. Then when you get to that moment where you've got to figure things out, you're going to have to pay Brock Purdy, that's when I'll call it a new window. A new window will open up. That's going to be a lot tougher for them to try and manage. But I trust Kyle Shanahan. I think he's a great head coach. I didn't think he really hurt them yesterday until that field goal attempt on 4th and 4 in overtime. So I still say there is a extended window, but with this group, it's just next year.
Sure, for this iteration, I'll say at least one more year, and this is a dangerous game to play, but I do think that it is relative to what else you have, specifically in the NFC Conference. Sure. And if you're talking about primary heavyweights out there, Detroit, indisputable. We know, especially with Ben Johnson back at the helm, overseeing that offense, a lot of those guys, skill position-wise, Gibbs, etc., they're going to grow. But there's so much instability from two of the teams that began this season with such great expectations in the NFC East, in Dallas, in Philadelphia. Do you think those teams next season are suddenly going to be markedly better in the second half? Green Bay, a lot of people would contend, still has a ways to go as far as developing all of those young second and third year guys. When you look at the entire scope of the conference, to me, San Francisco is head and shoulders above the rest. And yeah, they have some difficult contract situations coming up, but at least another year or two, you're going to be saying the 49ers name.
Totally agree. I think they've got one year left. Next year is the final year of this window for this version of the team. Trent Williams getting up there in age right now. Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Nick Bosa. You're starting to get expensive here. McCaffrey, you're getting expensive here and older and with a lot of injury questions. The reason why this one was so big for them, though, they had everybody healthy, man. Can you really expect CMC, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams all to be healthy this time next year? George Kittle to be healthy this time next year? I don't know. You're asking a lot. You don't need them to be healthy for the full 17-game regular season. You need them there, though, in the postseason. This is a different team when they don't have those guys on the field. So it is open. You got one more year of this window, in my opinion, but it's going to take some luck. Every year it takes some luck. You need health on your side. It's one of the reasons why some of the teams in the NFC fell apart this year. You just got banged up at the exact wrong time. But I think the 49ers are absolutely going to be there this time next year. They're going to be right back in contention. And I still believe Kyle Shanahan's going to get a Super Bowl before his time is up. I think right now he is, or Andy Reid was during his time in Philadelphia.
Do you think he'll have to go somewhere else?
I don't think so. It's a good organization. It just comes down to, like, does he find the quarterback? If Brock is the guy, you probably have a bunch of time left there. But Andy eventually fell into a situation where he didn't have the quarterback anymore. He lost a bunch of games, so he gets fired. It's the way that it works in Philadelphia. The same thing will happen in San Francisco. If 4, 5, 6 years down the road, they, for whatever reason, find out Brock Purdy's not the guy, he makes a bunch of money, the team falls apart around him, yeah, they'll eventually fire Kyle Shanahan, and then he'll have to do it elsewhere. But I think he's got the right support staff in place there. I think he's got a good GM. I think he'll win a Super Bowl for the 49ers. I do. If I had to guess today, I think Kyle Shanahan will win one in San Fran. Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind here on 101 ESPN and give you a chance to win a pair of lawn tickets to see Luke Bryan coming up at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. That's all next here on 101 ESPN.
The NBA plays on ESPN this Sunday. It's the NBA All-Star Game. Coverage starts at 6. Your home for the NBA is 101 ESPN.
Hey, it's BK. I got to tell you about my friends over at Victory Men's Health. Give them a call today. Go check them out at victorymenshealth.com. They had 3 locations scattered across the St. Louis metro, and now they have a 4th in Sunset Hills, Missouri, over off of Watson Road. More information on that can be found at victorymenshealth.com. Just opened up a couple of weeks ago. Whether you're interested in weight loss, testosterone, you've got some ED issues that you'd like to get taken care of, they've got help for you over at victorymenshealth.com. And you don't don't even have to go into one of the locations with Victory Men's Health because they are now offering telehealth for all of their services. Only requirement, you got to live in Illinois or Missouri, and this process is super easy. Go to the website, victorymenshealth.com, click on the telehealth tab, and from there, you'll pick whichever service that you're interested in, whether that's weight loss, hormones, micronutrient testing, and based on the service that you're interested in, they'll ship a lab draw kit directly to your home, and once those results are in, they'll do a video telehealth consult to review your results. Get it all over at victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
We'll give you a chance to win a pair of tickets to see Luke Bryan, lawn tickets on July 28th at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater, coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Tickets for Luke Bryan are on sale right now. In about 3 minutes or so, though, you'll be able to text in at 314-399-9646, and we'll tell you how you can win that pair of tickets to see Luke Bryan. T-Bone, to finish off the show today, we're going to talk about what we did to begin the show, and what we spent the majority of the show on today, which is the Chiefs winning their third Super Bowl in the past 4 seasons, the first team to go back-to-back since the Patriots did so in the early 2000s. What was your biggest takeaway from last night, T-Bone? The thing that you'll remember 10, 15, 20 years down the road about that Super Bowl, this team, is what?
I would say that the Kansas City Chiefs are now in the dynasty conversation. They are a dynasty, and I would go back to Patrick Mahomes. I did not think that this was the best cast he's had. I think the last 2 years have been down years for the Kansas City Chiefs. And yet he's gotten them to the Super Bowl both years and won both Super Bowls. And he played incredibly well down the stretch. For the first 3 quarters, I didn't think he was all that great. Fourth quarter took the game to another level. Same in overtime. And I know Kyle Shanahan's coming under a lot of scrutiny today. I didn't mind the decision to take the ball in overtime first, but if you're going to take the ball, you cannot settle for a field goal on 4th and 4 from the Kansas City 9.
Story has many different parts here. It's going to be a case of, I think, as we said earlier in the program, guys, a defense down the road that isn't going to be remembered in quite the positive vein that it should be. But more so, it is about number 15. And in this game, this particular year, this season, Patrick Mahomes not only took himself and elevated himself from one of the most transcendent athlete in football, but rather the whole sporting landscape, one of the guys you simply cannot best.
This is the Super Bowl that starts the conversation for Mahomes being the greatest ever. That kind of a performance, that kind of a drive, being clutch in a performance like that. This team dragging them to a Super Bowl with an over my dead body type of performance in the fourth quarter plus overtime. That's what starts that kind of a conversation. They are a dynasty at this point, winning 3 out of 4, getting to 6 straight AFC championship games, having the best regular season winning percentage in this run as well, and winning back-to-back. That's what it takes to be able to be a dynasty. Next year, they'll have an opportunity to capitalize on it a step further by becoming the first NFL team ever to win 3 straight. A lot of work to be done before they get there. We'll see what happens this offseason. Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, a lot of stuff to be able to get to. But Mahomes, an all-time fourth quarter plus overtime performance. That's what we're going to remember this for mostly. And Travis Kelce being able to come up clutch. 1 catch for 1 yard in the first half. And in the second half, looked like the best player on the field. So congratulations to all the Chiefs fans out there, myself included, for winning our 2nd in a row, 3rd in the last 4 years. I never thought I would see this day. Never. Ever, ever, ever. Chiefs were downtrodden as an organization when I was growing up. They won 1 playoff game in my entire upbringing. To see them relevant on a national stage is borderline shocking to me. To see them being talked about the way that the Patriots once were is... I never in a million years would have thought that we would be here. So thanks for coming along with the ride today. Appreciate it. We'll get back more to our normal programming tomorrow. For Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Right now, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you are texter number 101 and you can tell us what T-Bone decided to do instead of watching the halftime show in your texter number 101, you are getting a pair of tickets to see Luke Bryan on the lawn at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane's coming up next.
Congratulations to Jim Belcher in Olivet, Missouri. He was just named our 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now at 101ESPN.com to be the next Fan of the Week. Taking home Blues tickets and a $50 Buffalo Wild Wings gift card. 101 ESPN's Blues Fan of the Week is brought to you by